Chapter 290. There were actually quite a few heaven-grade secret arts, but the easiest way to obtain them was through the heaven's secret treasure trove, so for any cultivator, merit points were indispensable. Every secret art had a different cultivation path. There were a total of 360 spirit apertures in the human body, and the cultivation path could be said to be ever-changing. The quality of a secret art was reflected in its cultivation path. A good secret arts cultivation path could make cultivation and fighting more effective and faster, and vice versa. The connection between spirit apertures wasn't random. Even if two spirit apertures were adjacent to each other, it might not be possible to connect them at will. If one tried to do so rashly, it was very likely to lead to extremely bad consequences. The various secret arts circulating in the 9 provinces had all passed the test of time and generations of cultivators. Regardless of whether they were good or bad, they were all safe secret arts. If one didn't follow the cultivation path of a secret art to connect their spirit apertures, they might be fine if they were lucky, but if they were unlucky, it was very likely that their spirit chi would go berserk and their spirit apertures would be damaged. This was a consequence that no cultivator could bear. Secret arts were very important, but they weren't the biggest factor that affected a cultivator's strength. Even if one cultivated a slightly inferior secret art, as long as their foundation was strong enough, they could still display great strength. In the Heaven's Secret Treasure Trove, there were almost 100 heaven-grade secret arts suitable for Lu Yi, and the price range was also very large. The worst one cost more than 1,300 merit points, while the best one cost more than 5,000 merit points, a difference of 4 times. However, the efficiency of cultivating these two wouldn't be 4 times, and it wouldn't even exceed 40%. Lu Yi estimated that the difference was at most 10 to 20%. In other words, if one chose the most expensive secret art, their efficiency would be 10 to 20% higher than if they chose the cheapest one, and their strength would also increase by 10 to 20% in battle. This kind of improvement was huge for any cultivator, and it was also the benefit of spending more merit points. However, 5,000 merit points was too much. Even for those cultivators from top sects, it was impossible to accumulate so many merit points from the 1st order to the 9th order. For example, Sima Yang's goal was only to accumulate 1,500 merit points, but he didn't manage to do so until he died. Otherwise, he would have already switched to a heaven-grade secret art. Another example was Feng Yu. As the guardian of the Feng family's encampment, she would occasionally use her authority as a guardian to give him special treatment, using her authority for personal gain. Even so, she only managed to accumulate around 4,000 merit points, which in the end were all donated to the Jade Blood Sect. Lu Yi checked his own battlefield imprint. Identity: Jade Blood Sect Disciple. Cultivation: 155 apertures. Location: Spirit Stream Battlefield. Merit points: 5,132. He was still 200 merit points away from the most expensive cultivation method. Previously, after he had taken over the Feng clan and the Heaven Fiend Hall's encampment, he had obtained a lot of sect merit points. Before purchasing the Tianji Pillar, Hua Ci had given him a monthly salary, which had allowed him to accumulate 5,000 merit points. However, Lu Yi quickly spent another 2,000 points to purchase 10 sets of earthen core fire. He then obtained the Grand Spike, Breath Concealment, Insight, and other spirit runes. When he left Blue Blood Sect Station, he had less than 3,000 merit points. Now, he had so many merit points. Killing enemies was only a part of it. The other part was from the spoils of war he had obtained at Silverlight Island. From the Sky Pillar sect, he had obtained a lot of cultivators' storage pouches. Many of them were spirit tools, including the empty storage pouches, which he had sold to the Tianji treasury. For some reason, he wanted to accumulate a lot of merit points. Therefore, he had not used his merit points except for occasionally entering the Mirage Realm. However, he could not save the merit points used to purchase the heaven-grade cultivation method. This was related to his future cultivation and the difficulty of advancing to the Cloud River realm. Lu Yi casually took out a few spirit tools from his storage pouch and sold them. After collecting enough for the cultivation method, Lu Yi bought it. He did not obtain the real thing. Instead, a little flame imprinted on his forehead and disappeared. A warm feeling spread throughout his body. A lot of information poured into Lu Ye's mind, allowing him to understand the various mysteries of the cultivation method. The Great Sun-Colored Glass Secret Art was the name of the secret art. Unlike the Red Lotus Soaring Heaven secret art, this secret art did not have any supplementary techniques. However, when cultivated to the extreme, it had all kinds of magical powers, which was suitable for Lu Yi. Lu Yi obtained the Golden Cicada's Carefree secret art from Manager Yang, bought the Red Lotus Soaring Heaven secret art from Profound Sect, and now cultivated the Great Sun-Colored Glass secret art. He had grown step by step. Of course, his cultivation had not yet reached the 9th order, so he did not need to cultivate this secret art for the time being. Looking at the remaining merit points, he only had a little more than 30 points left. It was not even enough to enter the Mirage Realm once. He looked at Giant Armor. This guy was still immersed in the Tianji treasury. Yang Kai did not know if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Lu Yi gave him a push. Only then did Giant Armor take back his consciousness and look at him. Lu Yi gave him a storage pouch that he had prepared in advance and said, "If you want something, keep it. Sell the rest and buy this secret art." Giant Armor took it and turned around to go to the Tianji treasury. Lu Yi did not know how many merit points the things he gave Giant Armor could be sold for, but he estimated that they could be sold for about 2,000. In Immortal Essence City, there were many cultivators who died at their hands. Lu Yi had all their storage pouches. Every cultivator basically had their own spirit artifact. When one's cultivation reached the 7th order, the spirit artifacts they used would naturally not be too bad. Basically, they could be sold for 20 to 30 merit points. If dozens or hundreds of spirit artifacts were sold, the merit points accumulated would be considerable. Not to mention, there were some flight-type spirit artifacts in the storage pouch that Lu Yi gave to Giant Armor. These things were more expensive. After waiting for about half a cup of tea's time, Giant Armor came back to his senses and nodded slightly to Lu Yi, indicating that he was done. Lu Yi didn't say anything more and let him out. But after taking a few steps, there was a soft puff behind him. Lu Yi could not help but look back at Giant Armor. Giant Armor had an innocent expression. After taking another step, there was another puff behind him. Lu Yi looked around and quickened his pace. Giant Armor strode after him, and the sound of puffing could be heard endlessly. If someone who did not know heard this, they would think that Giant Armor was farting, but Lu Yi knew that it was not farting. It was the sound of the barrier of the spirit aperture breaking. Previously, when he was in Immortal Essence City, Giant Armor had shown him something that looked like a monster core. So Lu Yi knew that although Giant Armor's cultivation had been stuck at the 9th order for a long time, his cultivation progress had not fallen too far behind, because he could still cultivate and accumulate spirit energy. As long as he had a suitable secret art, he could make a breakthrough in a short time. But what Lu Yi did not expect was that Giant Armor's breakthrough would be so rapid and concentrated. Normal cultivators always had a process to open their spirit aperture, and Lu Yi was no exception. He needed to stimulate his spirit chi to break the barrier of his spirit aperture and complete the process of opening a new spirit aperture. When his cultivation was not high enough, this process was not pleasant and took a long time. Now that his cultivation was higher, it was easier to break the barrier of his spirit aperture, but it was not like Giant Armor's. Giant Armor's spirit aperture barrier seemed to be a decoration. Wherever his spirit chi flowed, it was easily broken. Of course, this might have something to do with his accumulation. A dam could block the washing of a stream, but it could not block the impact of a river. On the way back to his residence from Heavenly Secret Hall, Lu Yi silently calculated in his heart. There were 59 sounds from Giant Armor's side. In other words, he had opened 59 apertures in a short time. He was already a cultivator with 180 apertures opened. Now that he had 59 more, it was 239, only one aperture away from the next realm. This was obviously not a coincidence, but Giant Armor's intention. After returning to his residence, Giant Armor immediately began to cultivate. It was probably because he had consumed too much power from his monster core and was eager to replenish it. He was the kind of person who had both great talent for cultivation and could cultivate in peace. Back in Immortal Essence City, Lu Yi had noticed that Giant Armor always maintained a state of cultivation when there was nothing to do, as if he did not want to miss the slightest opportunity to accumulate his spirit chi. Influenced by Giant Armor, Lu Yi also took out a book and studied it while cultivating. The place where the two of them were now was a small courtyard with a beautiful environment. It should be the place where the Shenyin Palace entertained guests. While the two of them were resting in the Shenyin Palace, the Windflower Yard and the Sunlight Mountain gradually found out what had happened in Immortal Essence City. They learned that the reason why their cultivators were annihilated in Immortal Essence City was all because of Lu Ye of the Jade Blood sect. The two sects were all gnashing their teeth in hatred. Especially the Windflower Yard, they had some enmity with Lu Yi, but it was only limited to one of their disciples who was killed by him on the Golden Light Peak. But now, the enmity was huge. They wanted to take revenge, but they had no way to do it. They were depressed, so they could only join hands to fight against the cultivators of the Shenyin Palace. This led to a sharp increase in conflicts between the cultivators of the Shenyin Palace and the two sects in recent days. Even the Overcloud Palace was involved. For a time, people from all sides fought against each other. It was very lively and both sides suffered losses. A few days later, Gu Kanyang listened to Ji Yan's report on the conflicts between his sect's cultivators and the Windflower Yard and the Sunlight Mountain. He nodded slightly and said, "Tell the disciples to be careful. Don't give the two sects any chance to take advantage of us." "Sir," Ji Yan replied. Another young man in white sitting next to him said, "Senior Marshal Brother, is there no way to deal with Giant Armor?" This person was the vice guardian of the Shenyin Palace. Usually, Gu Kanyang would lead the team when there was a large-scale operation, and he would stay behind to guard the station. No sect could refuse a powerful body cultivator like Giant Armor. However, he had been following Sima Yang. Now that Sima Yang was dead, this young man naturally had some ideas. If he could take Giant Armor into the Shenyin Palace, it would strengthen the power of his sect. Other things aside, if there were any conflicts with the Windflower Yard or the Sunlight Mountain in the future, with Giant Armor at the front, it would reduce a lot of losses. Gu Kanyang shook his head. "Don't think about Giant Armor anymore. Brother Ye has helped me and our sect. Now that Giant Armor has chosen to follow him, he is Brother Ye's man. Rashly trying to rope him in will only make him unhappy." The young man in white said, "But I heard that Giant Armor hasn't joined." Before he could finish, Gu Kanyang stared at him with a stern face. The young man in white quickly said, "I know, Senior Marshal Brother. I won't think about Giant Armor anymore." "That's good." Chapter 291. While they were talking, the young man in white suddenly lowered his head to check his battlefield imprint and received a message. After a while, he raised his head and looked at Gu Kanyang with a strange expression. "Senior Brother, is fellow cultivator Lu proficient in formations?" Gu Kanyang thought for a moment and said, "Rumor has it that he obtained the inheritance of a spirit tattooist and can activate some spirit tattoos. Formations are closely related to spirit tattoos." The young man in white did not know whether to laugh or cry. Fellow cultivator Lu is at the edge of the sect protecting formation. He seems to be studying how to break the formation. Break the formation? Gu Kanyang and Ji Yan were stunned. Of course, spell formations could be broken, but the cultivation base of the spirit stream realm was still too low. Even if he could break spell formations, he would only be able to break some simple ones. 4 large-scale spell formations like the sect protecting grand spell formation, there was no way he could break through them on his own. This was also the reason why the encampments of the various sects were difficult to break. Every sect's encampment had its own protective formation. Maybe he's cultivating the formation. Send the message, don't worry about it. Gu Kanyang did not think too much. Since Lu Yi wanted to study how to break the formation, he would let him. After all, he would not lose anything. On the other side, at the edge of the Divine Hidden Palace's protective formation, Lu Yi was observing the operation of the formation. If one wanted to break the formation, they had to first find the formation's flaw and then use some targeted methods to target this flaw. No matter what kind of formation it was, It could not be perfect. However, the more advanced the formation, the fewer flaws it had. For example, the sect-protecting formation of the Spirit Stream battlefield was basically set up with the formation foundation bought from the Tianji treasure vault. The person who set up and maintained the formation might not even be proficient in this Dao. Take the Jade Blood Sect's side as an example. The person controlling the protective formation was Now Hua Ci. She knew nothing about formations, but with the corresponding Jade Tablet, she could easily control the formation. The situation at the Divine Hidden Palace was the same. The person controlling the formation was not proficient in formations, so how perfect could the formation be? However, it was enough to block the attack of a Spirit Stream Realm cultivator. When Lu Yi was at the Jade Blood Sect, he learned the Tao of Spirit Tattoos from Madame Yun. He would first break and then build. Madame Yun constructed the Spirit Tattoos, and he would break them. If Spirit Tattoos were considered formations, then Lu Ye's action of breaking the Spirit Tattoos was breaking the formation. Of course, a real formation was much more complicated than a simple 1 or 2 spiritual inscriptions, especially a defensive formation that could cover an encampment. There were probably dozens of spiritual inscriptions involved. In the past, he didn't know much about spirit arrays, so even after Blue Blood Sect had its own protective spirit array, Lu Yi hadn't studied it. It wasn't until he left the Jade Blood Sect that Lu Yi began to learn some things about array formations through the book system. His attainments in the array Dao gradually improved. When he was in the Immortal Essence City, he could already arrange some simple array formations by himself. Now that he had accumulated enough theoretical knowledge, Lu Yi wanted to give it a try. However, when he really got started, he realized that things were more complicated than he had imagined. The entire sect protection formation was integrated into one. With his current eyesight and experience, he could not see any flaws at all. If he couldn't even find a flaw in the formation, how could he break it? Therefore, after a moment, Lu Yi slowly closed his eyes. Spiritual energy began to gather in his eyes, forming an extremely complicated pattern. Insight. This was the 11th spiritual inscription he had obtained from the talent tree. When he raided the sky-bearing sect's mineral vein, Lu Yi had used this spiritual inscription to find the whereabouts of a ghost cultivator. When he opened his eyes again, the whole world seemed to have changed. Everything seemed unreal. Colorful lights flowed in his field of vision. Fluorescent lights fluttered and ribbons flew, constantly twisting and changing. This was the flow of heaven and earth spirit energy. The greatest function of the Insight Spirit inscription was to clearly see the flow of spirit energy and the changes in spiritual energy. Long ago, Lu Yi had vaguely sensed that the use of this spiritual inscription was not only to find the whereabouts of hidden enemies, but it might also have a miraculous effect in breaking spirit arrays. When he looked at the sect protection formation with the Insight Spirit inscription, he immediately saw some differences. The spiritual energy on the light curtain flowed like water from one direction. Because the light curtain of the sect protection formation was circular, with half of it above ground and the other half underground, this process could be repeated. As long as the sect protection formation had enough spiritual energy, it could be maintained. The Spirit Stream battlefield was rich in heaven and earth spirit energy. Every sect's encampment had the support of the Divine Pillar, so the sect protection formation could store a huge amount of spiritual energy on normal days. When attacked, it could increase the power of the sect protection formation. However, on normal days, the sect protection formation would only maintain a minimum level of operation. From a normal view, the entire sect protection formation's light curtain was like a transparent water curtain. However, to Lu Yi, who had the Insight Spirit inscription, the sect protection formation's light curtain was formed by yin and yang elements. There were also spiritual inscriptions mixed in. Each of these spiritual inscriptions could play its own role, such as increasing the defensive strength of the sect protection formation, increasing the speed of the sect protection formation's spiritual energy flow, and so on. The entire sect protection formation was like an extremely huge, complex, and dense restriction. However, it was different from the restrictions that were usually refined in spirit weapons. After the circulation of spiritual energy, this restriction formed a complete sect protection formation. Lu Yi understood. No wonder Madame Yun said that formation cultivators could be regarded as a branch of spirit tattooists. It was because the sect protection formation itself was a restriction formed by spiritual inscriptions. Looking at the embedding technique of those spiritual inscriptions, Lu Yi even saw some familiar traces in them. The leaves on his talent tree not only contained spiritual inscriptions, but also a large number of special embedding techniques and skills. These things could barely be regarded as spiritual inscriptions, because if they were constructed, they could exist stably. However, they were different from normal spiritual inscriptions and couldn't play a role on their own. They were just bridges used for embedding different spiritual inscriptions. Lu Yi continued to observe, but he couldn't find any obvious flaws in the light curtain in front of him. He pondered for a moment, then stepped forward. As he walked, he carefully examined the sect protection formation. After walking for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he suddenly stopped and raised his eyes to look ahead. This position was slightly different from other places. If the other positions of the sect protection formation were integrated, then there were some traces of embedding here. These traces of embedding were the flaws and also the nodes of the sect protection formation. If he wasn't mistaken, the position under his feet should be the center of the two sect protection formations. The sect protection formation was built by 16 sect protection formations. The distance between the sect protection formations was very far. Even if they could resonate to form the sect protection formation, after the formation was formed, the connection would be weaker than the other positions. If the blue blood sect's spirit array was compared to a jigsaw puzzle, then it was composed of 16 pieces. Each piece represented an area covered by the spirit array's foundation after it was activated. No matter how perfect the integration between the pieces was, there would always be gaps, and these gaps were the nodes. Ordinary people couldn't see them, and Lu Yi couldn't see them either. However, with the blessing of the insight spirit tattoos, it was different. After discovering the location of the nodes, Lu Yi was relieved. He knew that his previous guess was right. The insight spirit tattoos really had a miraculous effect in breaking the sect protection formation. Looking at the nodes in front of him, Lu Yi slowly pulled out his Pan Shan saber. He activated his spiritual power, and the saber flashed with brilliance. With the blessing of double sharpness, he used all his strength to stab forward. The tip of the saber accurately pierced the nodes. The Pan Shan saber buzzed, and his spiritual power surged. In the next moment, the protection formation shook, and the light curtain that was flowing smoothly distorted. Lu Yi put away his saber and continued to attack. The long saber in his hand turned into afterimages, constantly attacking the nodes of the sect protection formation. Boom, boom, boom. The sect protection formation kept twisting. The entire encampment of the Shanin Palace was alarmed. All the cultivators who noticed this scene looked around in shock. Someone even shouted, "Enemy attack!" Although they didn't see where the enemy was, this was clearly a sign that the sect protection formation was being attacked. Gu Kanyang, the young man in white, and Ji Yen were all startled and appeared one after another. The young man in white directly took out the jade pendant that controlled the sect protection formation and activated the power of the sect protection formation to the maximum. After a moment of chaos, the news came. It wasn't an enemy attack, but Lu Yi, who had come as a guest, was attacking their sect protection formation. Looking at the junior brother who came to report the situation, the corner of Gu Kanyang's eyes twitched. He caused this by himself? Yes, I just saw him attack the sect protection formation with his own eyes. The cultivator who reported the situation wasn't far from Lu Yi, so he saw it clearly. To be honest, he was also shocked. He never thought that there would be someone in this world who could cause such a big reaction to the protection formation by himself. After all, Lu Yi was only at the 8th order spirit stream realm. If he cultivated to the 9th order heaven grade, wouldn't he be able to break their sect protection formation with a single slash? Let's go and take a look. Gu Kanyang was clearly aware of this as well. He led the white-clothed youth and Ji Yen towards Lu Yi's location. A large group of cultivators followed behind them in a grandiose manner. When they arrived, they saw Lu Yi sitting cross-legged there, seemingly recovering his spirit chi. After the young man in white controlled the sect protection formation and strengthened its power, Lu Yi stopped. He knew that his actions just now would definitely attract the attention of the divine hidden palace, so he simply came here to wait for them. However, he didn't expect so many people to come. Brother Ye, were you the one attacking the sect protection formation just now? Gu Kanyang stepped forward and asked. I have some ideas that I want to test. Did you gain anything? Gu Kanyang raised his eyebrows. I have more ideas. I'm sorry for disturbing everyone. It's fine, it's fine. Gu Kanyang kept waving his hand. Brother Ye, if you have anything you want to try, feel free to try it. The divine hidden palace will fully cooperate with you. It was no wonder he was so enthusiastic. Lu Yi had saved the lives of many cultivators from the divine hidden palace before. If Lu Yi really broke the sect protection formation with his own strength, it would be a big deal. Everyone knew the benefits of attacking and occupying someone else's base, but how could it be so easy? The protection formation was there. Chapter 292. If Lu Yi was able to figure out a way to break the formation, then the major forces of the Wanmo Ridge would have nowhere to cry. The Shin'in Palace was now fully supporting Lu Yi. Once he succeeded, the Shin'in Palace would be the first to benefit. It was just attacking his own defensive formation. What was the big deal? It did not matter even if the formation was destroyed. It could even be said that Gu Kanyang could not wait to see this scene. Seeing Gu Kanyang's attitude, how could Lu Yi not know what he was thinking? Thank you, Brother Gu. Gu Kanyang laughed. It's a small matter. You're welcome, Brother Yi. Who's controlling your sect's formation? Lu Yi asked. Gu Kanyang pointed at the young man in white beside him. Junior brother Wei Li is in charge of the formation. Wei Li immediately stepped forward. Does Brother Lu have any orders? You flatter me. Brother Wei, please adjust the formation and return it to its previous state. The reason why Lu Yi stopped was that the formation had been activated to the extreme by Wei Li. If he attacked again, it would no longer have the same effect as before. He had just started to study how to break the defensive formation. Naturally, he had to start from the simplest. It would not be too late to increase the difficulty after he understood the knack. Hearing this, Wei Li hurriedly activated the jade pendant in his hand. The large formation slowly calmed down with a buzzing sound. Gu Kanyang said a few more words to Lu Yi and left with his people. Studying how to break the formation was not something that could be done in a short period of time. There was no need to gather here to watch the show. However, it was foreseeable that their defensive formation would be destroyed in the coming days. Not only did Gu Kanyang have no complaints, but he was even a little expectant. He instructed Wei Li to fully cooperate with Lu Yi if he needed anything. After the people from the Shin'in Palace left, Lu Yi activated his insight again and looked at the nodes of the large formation. The probing just now made him understand that it was impossible to break the formation with brute force, even if it was the weakest formation and even if he saw the nodes. Of course, if the formation was not strengthened with the power of his attack just now, there was a chance that he could break the formation. However, this kind of thing was obviously impossible. Once he attacked the enemy's base, the enemy would definitely strengthen the formation. Since brute force didn't work, he could only rely on the Tao of spirit inscriptions. He observed the changes in the flow of the yin and yang energies at the nodes and thought of a way to break it. He raised his hand and pressed it against the light screen of the formation. His spirit energy surged, and with his hand as the source, his spirit energy spread out in all directions. The yin and yang energies quickly spread out and instantly covered an area of 30 feet. In the past, Lu Yi couldn't do this. Even though he was a spiritual tattooist and had better control over his spiritual power than other cultivators in the same realm, he couldn't construct the yin and yang elements covering such a large area in an instant. However, after cleansing his divine soul in the soul-cleansing pool in the immortal Essence City, his control over his spiritual power had become much stronger, which allowed him to break through his previous limit. Breaking the formation was the same as opening the restriction lock on the storage bag, because the formation itself was a huge restriction. The difference was that the requirement to break the formation was higher. Lu Yi could take his time to open the restriction lock on the storage bag. As long as he used his spiritual power to construct the opposite foundation of the restriction, he could break the restriction lock on the storage bag. He couldn't take his time to break the formation because the formation was running all the time. If he was slow, he couldn't break it at all. This was a formation that no one was activating. If someone was activating it, there would be more changes in the formation. At that time, he really needed to seize the fleeting opportunity to break the formation. Lu Yi wanted to break the formation now. First, he needed to see the connection of the yin and yang energies near the nodes. Second, he needed to construct the opposite foundation in a very short time and fit it perfectly. In this way, the foundational elements he constructed would be able to melt the light screen of the grand formation. Only then would he be able to break open the node and open the grand formation. With the help of the insight spirit inscriptions, the first point was not difficult for him, but the second point was difficult. After a short rest, Lu Yi tried a second time. Even though he had great control over his own spirit qi, it was not easy to accomplish this because in just a few breaths of time, he had to construct hundreds, if not thousands, of foundations. Not a single one of them could go wrong, or else it would be useless. In the following days, the cultivators of the Shenyin Palace often saw a figure sitting alone beside the formation. Occasionally, their protective formation would suddenly vibrate. At first, the cultivators were not used to it, but as the number of times increased, they became used to it. Wei Li, who was in charge of controlling the formation, would also receive messages from Lu Yi from time to time and make corresponding adjustments to the formation. With the full cooperation of the Shenyin Palace, Lu Ye's progress in breaking the formation gradually increased. He learned from his failures and adjusted his direction. The books he brought from Madame Yun were of great help at this time. He could find inspiration and even answers to many questions he didn't understand from those books. In the blink of an eye, 1 month had passed. At the same location as the previous node, Gu Kanyang and Wei Li stood inside the formation while Lu Yi stood outside. Both sides faced each other across the light screen of the formation. "It's starting!" Wei Li shouted in a low voice and took out the jade pendant that controlled the formation. Under his control, the protective formation was instantly activated to the extreme. The light screen that enveloped the encampment suddenly became much more solid, and there was even a halo flowing on it. On the opposite side, Lu Ye's eyes were observing the enhancement of the spiritual inscriptions. He stared at the various changes at the nodes of the formation for 5 minutes before he suddenly stepped forward. Light flashed on his legs, and with the enhancement of the wind spiritual inscriptions, Lu Ye's speed suddenly increased to the extreme. At the same time, the spiritual power around him surged, and hundreds of yin and yang elements connected and spread out on the surface of his body. It made him seem as if he was wearing a layer of spiritual clothing made of foundations. Then he crashed into the protective array, and his entire body was embedded in it. Under the dumbfounded gazes of Gu Kanyang and Wei Li, his body that was embedded in the array broke free from the restraints of the array. It felt as if he had pulled his body out of the array, and there was even a soft pop. That's it. Lu Yeping recovered his spiritual power and walked into the array formation from outside. He then stood in front of Gu Kanyang and Wei Li. His initial research direction was on how to crack the formation, but after some research, the direction of his research changed. It was mainly because Lu Yi realized that his current cultivation level was still too low. Even if he could forcibly break the nodes of the formation, he couldn't maintain it. If the protective formation was compared to a water ripple, then the principle of breaking the formation was to break a gap in the water ripple. In this way, when attacking and occupying the enemy's encampment, one side could rush into the enemy's encampment through this gap and have a head-on battle with the enemy without being obstructed by the protective formation. With Lu Ye's current ability, there was no way he could open a gap in the water ripple that could be maintained for a long time. At most, he could break a gap in the water ripple. However, this was meaningless because the formation had a self-repairing function, and the gap would be closed very soon. Sensing that his previous idea was difficult to realize, Lu Yi almost gave up. However, after reading something in a book, Lu Yi had some strange ideas. What followed was more than half a month of experiments, and there were results before him. Gu Kanyang and Wei Li stared blankly at Lu Yi, speechless for a long time. "How did you do it?" Gu Kanyang couldn't figure it out. The formation was clearly still functioning, But Lu Yi ignored the obstruction of the formation and easily walked into the formation from the outside. This was really unbelievable. The formation has nodes, and the location of the nodes is a flaw. Find the nodes and see the connection of the basic elements at the nodes. Then use spiritual power to activate the exact same basic elements and forcibly insert them into the nodes. This way, you can pass through the nodes of the formation, merge yourself with the formation and enter it. Gu Kenyang was deep in thought. I see. He wailed in his heart, I don't understand. Simply put, it's camouflage and deception. Lu Yi explained again. I use spiritual power to cover my body and construct the same basic elements as the nodes of the formation. I camouflage myself and insert them into the nodes, causing the formation to mistakenly think that I'm a part of it. This way, it will accept my existence. This time, Gu Kenyang vaguely understood some of it, but he really couldn't figure it out. Could something like a formation be deceived? Senior brother, this is similar to how a fly doesn't stare at a seamless egg, Wei Li suddenly said. Gu Kenyang suddenly understood. If the protective formation is an egg, then brother Yi is, if you really want to think of it this way, it's not impossible. But this doesn't make much sense. Gu Kenyang frowned. Although Lu Yi had demonstrated how to enter the formation through camouflage and deception in front of them, this really wasn't of much help in capturing the enemy's base. If the formation wasn't broken, it would be very difficult to capture the base. This is what I think. Lu Yi explained in detail, and Gu Kenyang and Wei Li's eyes gradually lit up. When Lu Yi finished speaking, the two of them looked at each other and saw the eagerness in each other's eyes. If this succeeded, it would definitely be a great contribution, and the two of them would be rewarded by the sect in the future. So, almost without hesitation, Gu Kenyang made the decision and said, it's rare that brother Yi is willing to take such a risk. How can the hidden god palace shrink back? Then I'll wait for your news? I'll arrange everything else. After a short while at the base of the Lingyun Palace, Zhou Pei, who was meditating and cultivating, received a message. After checking it, he found that it was a message from Gu Kenyang, so he replied, Brother Gu, what's the matter? Good news. Oh? What's the good news? Is Brother Zhou interested in capturing the base of the Windflower Court? Even though Zhou Pei was shocked, his eyes became much clearer. Half a day later, at the intersection of the Hidden God Palace and the Windflower Court's base, a few cultivators were engaged in a battle. However, soon, one of them was at a disadvantage and fled after being injured. The winner didn't rashly pursue them because it was difficult to determine whether the other party was luring them in. This kind of thing had happened quite often in the past. The few people who were injured were from the Hidden God Palace. Among them, a delicate girl was obviously unconvinced. After escaping to a safe distance, she turned around and shouted at the few people from the Windflower Court, just you wait. I'll call Brother Gu to annihilate all of you. The leader of the Windflower Court sneered, useless barking. Come if you dare. The girl was so angry that she screamed and rushed forward with her sword. Fortunately, her companions still had some sense and quickly stopped her. Chapter 293. The injured people from Shunyin Palace fled. They could still hear the girl's shouts from afar. It seemed that she was quite angry. That girl seems to be the descendant of an elder from Shunyin Palace. She seems to have been spoiled. A person from Fenghua Yard shook his head and laughed. To them, the girl's behavior of speaking tough words when she couldn't win seemed rather childish. If tough words were useful, why would she cultivate? The two camps had been fighting for so many years, and they were like fire and water. If they had the ability to kill, no one would be willing to waste their breath. Therefore, no matter how arrogant the girl was, they didn't take it to heart. However, only one day later, they received a message telling them to return to their station as soon as possible. A large number of cultivators from Shunyin Palace were about to invade. They were dumbfounded as they recalled the girl's arrogant words before she left. They thought that she was just speaking tough words when she couldn't win. Who would have thought that she really had the ability to make Gu Kenyang bring people to attack Shunyin Palace? They felt that they had underestimated the girl's status in Shunyin Palace. They didn't dare to hide anything and quickly reported what had happened. You may, the guardian of Fenghua Yard, didn't say much about it. She simply replied that she understood. The cultivators from Fenghua Yard who received the message hurried back to their station. The atmosphere wasn't tense. With the protection formation, they were quite at ease. It wasn't that Shenin Palace hadn't attacked before, but every time they came aggressively and left dejectedly. Soon, another piece of news spread. This time, Shenin Palace wasn't the only one who came to invade their station. Cloud over Palace also made a move. A group of people was rushing here. It seemed that these two groups had contacted each other in advance. In Tianji Hall, Yu Mei, the guardian of Fenghua Yard, looked at the news that had just been sent in from outside. She looked calm. Two groups from Haotian Alliance attacking at the same time was within her expectations. Like her junior brothers and sisters, she wasn't worried that her protection formation would be broken. What she needed to consider now was whether these two groups were just putting on a show or if they had other plans. If it was the former, she didn't need to worry too much. If it was the latter, she had to be careful. At the very least, she had to be mentally prepared to fight against the enemy for a long time. After muttering to herself for a moment, she sent out a few messages. Soon, the other forces of Myriad Demons Ridge in the vicinity learned that the Hidden God Palace and the Overcloud Palace had sent troops to attack the Windflower Courtyard. Yu Mei wasn't asking for reinforcements. It wouldn't make much sense to ask for reinforcements at this point. However, the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Over Palace's encampments were empty. Once these Myriad Demons Ridge forces learned of this, they would definitely take action. When that happened, they would be able to put pressure on Hidden God Palace and Cloud Over Palace and force them to retreat as soon as possible. Besieging Wei to rescue Zhao was a common occurrence on the Spirit Stream battlefield, and the nearby factions would all help each other out. They waited quietly for half a day until evening. Two large ship-like flying spirit tools appeared side by side in front of the Windflower Manor's cultivators. One of them had the symbol of the Hidden God Palace on its bow, while the other had the symbol of the Overcloud Palace. The two large ships stopped about 1.5 kilometers away from the Windflower Courtyard's encampment. From the large ships, one figure after another came out in a line. In the Windflower Courtyard's encampment, Yu Mei, who was floating in midair, used her eyesight to observe. Her expression was grave. She discovered that the two Grand Heaven Alliance's forces had mobilized quite a bit of manpower. Each of them had at least 400 people. One had to know that the Inner Circle's encampments usually had about 500 to 600 people. Mobilizing 400 people at once meant that only 100 people were left to guard the encampment. Yu Mei immediately understood that this battle wouldn't end so easily. Could it be as those disciples had reported? That the descendant of the Hidden God Palace's elder had instigated Gu Kanyang to do this? Was Gu Kanyang that stupid? She faintly felt that something wasn't right, but it was meaningless to think about it now. The two Grand Heaven Alliance's cultivators were at the city gates, and the Windflower Courtyard had no choice but to fight. The cultivators of the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Over Palace gathered together, and the total number of people reached about 800. This was the maximum number of people that the two forces could mobilize. On the other hand, the Windflower Courtyard only had about 400 people. Originally, the Windflower Courtyard also had about 500 cultivators. However, Chuqing's team had suffered heavy losses in the Immortal Essence City. Nearly 100 people had been annihilated, causing the Windflower Courtyard to lose about 20% of their manpower. These days, whenever Yu Mei thought about this, she couldn't sleep at night. Under the leadership of Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei, the 800 cultivators majestically attacked the Windflower Courtyard's encampment. There was no prelude or verbal confrontation. When the 800 cultivators arrived outside the Great Formation, the attack began. The flowing light of spells and imperial tools began to dance and bombarded the Great Formation's light screen. It was as if stones had been thrown into a calm lake, causing layers of ripples to appear on the light screen. The Great Formation buzzed. Yu Mei stood in front of the Tianji Hall square and held the Formation Jade pendant in her hand. She adjusted and controlled the Great Formation's defensive power. At the same time, the Windflower Courtyard's cultivators were constantly filling up the formation's base with spirit stones so that the Great Formation could absorb the power of the spirit stones to replenish itself. Although the Great Formation normally stored a large amount of spirit power, no one knew how long the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Soaring Palace's attack would last this time. Using spirit stones to replenish the Great Formation's energy consumption would undoubtedly allow the Great Formation to last longer. No matter which faction it was, they would choose to do this when their encampment was under attack. The Windflower Courtyard's encampment was very rich in heaven and earth spirit chi. It was likely that the Tianji Pillar had a lot of support, so the Great Formation was very sturdy. Nearly 800 people from the Grand Sky Alliance and Cloud Soaring Palace attacked in batches for an hour, but the Great Formation remained unmoved. Apart from the layers of ripples that kept moving, even the light screen of the Great Formation did not change much. However, this was clearly not the Great Formation's limit. Through the Great Formation's light screen, Yumei looked at Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei expressionlessly. She could not figure out what the two of them were trying to do. They had fought many times and knew each other very well. Yumei did not believe that the two of them working together would be useless. However, she did not find anything suspicious, which made her feel slightly uneasy. The unknown was the greatest enemy. Fortunately, she had spread the news that a few factions from the Myriad Devil Ridge had started to gather to attack the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Soaring Palace's encampment. They should be on their way now. As long as Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei received the news, they would not dare to stay here any longer. They would definitely retreat when the time came. Just as she was thinking about this, she suddenly felt a trace of abnormality from the jade pendant. As the person controlling the Great Formation, she could sense the changes in various parts of the Great Formation through the jade pendant in her hand. The abnormality just now was as if the Great Formation had been broken in a certain direction. Yumei's expression immediately changed. She turned her head to look in that direction, but she saw that the Great Formation's light screen was as stable as before. Was it an illusion? Yumei was not sure. She had always been cautious. She immediately picked a group of people and ordered them to investigate the abnormality. At the same time, somewhere in the Great Formation, Lu Yi had silently snuck in. The abnormality that Yumei felt was the movement when he snuck in. Normally, he would not be able to do such a thing. However, it was currently night. Moreover, the attention of the Windflower Courtyard's cultivators was attracted by the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Soaring Palace. Who would notice him? After sneaking into the Windflower Courtyard's encampment, he immediately activated the power of the disappearance bracelet on his wrist. He restrained his aura and concealed his whereabouts. If he did not have this life-saving item bestowed by Madame Yun, Lu Yi would not have dared to do this. Even if he had the ability to break into someone else's great defensive formation, his whereabouts would be exposed very quickly. However, it was different with the disappearance bracelet. After all, it was bestowed by Madame Yun. Its concealment ability was much stronger than that of those ghost cultivators. In the plan that he and Gu Kanyang had decided on, the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Soaring Palace would be in charge of attacking the Great Formation head-on. They would restrain the Windflower Courtyard's cultivators' energy and attention. He would wait for an opportunity to sneak in and conceal himself. Then, he would find an opportunity to kill Yumei and seize her jade pendant. As long as the jade pendant was in his hands, the Great Defensive Formation would be completely useless. This plan was very simple, but sometimes, simplicity was the key to victory. The more complicated the plan, the more flaws there were, and the easier it was to make mistakes. For the time being, everything was progressing smoothly. His method of sneaking into the Great Formation was simply a perfect match for the disappearance bracelet. In order to perfectly conceal himself, he did not even bring Hu Pe and Yi with him this time. He stood in place and waited quietly for a moment. As expected, a group of Windflower Courtyard cultivators hurried over. Previously, when he communicated with Wei Li, he learned that when he sneaked into the Great Formation, Wei Li could sense some abnormalities. However, that was all. As for what kind of abnormality it was, if Wei Li did not see it with his own eyes, he would not be able to confirm it. Therefore, Lu Yi knew that after he sneaked into the Windflower Courtyard's encampment, there would definitely be people coming to investigate. This group of cultivators had 6 people. They looked around and did not find anything. Then, they quickly left to investigate the surroundings. Lu Yi did not move. This was because he sensed that there was something wrong about a few hundred feet away. There seemed to be some vitality flowing there. In the past, it was impossible for him to sense this. However, after his soul was cleansed in the soul-cleansing pool, his perception ability had been greatly improved. Any movement within a few hundred feet could not escape his perception. The closer it was to him, the more obvious it was. It should be a ghost cultivator. The guardian of the Windflower Courtyard was indeed a careful person. On the surface, there was only one group of people coming to investigate, but in fact, there were 2 groups. If Lu Yi had acted rashly just now, his whereabouts would have been exposed. The ghost cultivator wandered around for a while and did not find anything. Then he left. From the beginning to the end, Lu Yi did not see him. After the ghost cultivator left, Lu Yi waited in place for the time it took to burn a stick of incense before he moved. The disappearance bracelet's concealment effect was very strong. The only disadvantage was that he could not activate his spiritual power or move. Once he activated his spiritual power or moved, he would immediately be exposed. Lu Yi was not sure if there was anyone hiding nearby, but if his whereabouts were really exposed, he could only retreat the way he came. Since he could enter, he could naturally retreat. Chapter 294. What reassured Lu Yi was that he didn't receive any attacks after he revealed himself. He slightly restrained his aura, then ran towards a place with many people. He looked like he was in a hurry. The plan had progressed to this stage, and he was basically halfway to success. Now, he didn't need to deliberately hide his whereabouts. There were a few hundred people in a station. Other than those from the main sect, there were also those from other sects who were affiliated with the sect, as well as some independent cultivators who relied on the sect. It was impossible for all the cultivators to be familiar with each other, so it didn't matter much even if someone saw him, unless someone knew Lu Yi and could identify him at a glance. Moreover, it was currently night, so it was more convenient for him to act. As he ran, Lu Yi lowered his head slightly, and the hair on his forehead fell down, covering most of his face. Soon, he arrived at the place where the cultivators from the Windflower Courtyard were gathered. Their own station was being attacked, so they all gathered here in groups of 3 to 5. Although they weren't worried about the formation being broken, they still needed to be on guard. When Lu Yi rushed over from the back of the station, he did indeed attract the attention of many people. However, most people only glanced at him and didn't pay attention to him anymore. After all, no one would have thought that someone would be able to sneak in without anyone noticing before the protective formation was broken. A few people took a second look at Lu Yi and only felt that he was a little unfamiliar. Similarly, they didn't think too much about it. In the stations of various sects, unfamiliar faces would often appear. They were all independent cultivators who came from other sects to join the sect or had recently joined the sect. The cultivators themselves would often cultivate in seclusion, and they would also go out and walk around. No one dared to say that they knew everyone in the station. Outside the formation, the corner of Gu Kanyang's eyes couldn't help but twitch as he watched Lu Yi blend into the crowd. He secretly reflected on himself. It looked like he still had to set up some simple formations in the station later, so that he wouldn't be unaware when enemies sneaked in like this in the future. He didn't need to set up overly complicated formations. He only needed some simple warning formations. In this way, even if someone could sneak into the station like Lu Yi, their whereabouts would be exposed. Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, Lu Yi had already arrived 15 meters away from Yume. Previously, when he was hiding in the dark, he had already seen this woman before he barged into the formation. He also knew from the information provided by Gu Kanyang that she was the guardian of the Windflower Courtyard. This woman was wearing a close-fitting palace dress, which set off her graceful figure. This was a spell cultivator. When Lu Ye's cultivation base was very low, he hated Dharma cultivators the most. Luo Ji and Dong Shai had given him a huge psychological trauma. However, as his cultivation level gradually increased, he gradually fell in love with Dharma cultivators. With the enhancement of the Wind Spirit rune, his speed was fast enough and he could easily close the distance between him and the enemy Dharma cultivators. He could also easily dodge the spells cast by the Dharma cultivators. If he really couldn't dodge them, he would have the Defense Spirit rune to block them. After getting close to a weapon cultivator like him, the outcome of a spell cultivator was usually very tragic. It could be said that Dharma cultivators of the same level as him would not be able to do anything to him, even if their cultivation was 1 or 2 levels higher. Yumei's cultivation was undoubtedly at the 9th order spirit stream realm, and she was on the verge of breaking through to the next level. Her original plan was to wait for Chuqing to return, then transfer the position of guardian to her, and then choose a deputy guardian from the sect to take over. Unfortunately, Chuqing had died in the Immortal Essence City. Even the candidate for the vice envoy had died. As a result, a month had already passed, but the position of the vice envoy was still empty. She was the only one in charge of the Windflower Courtyard. It was said that the elders of the sect were quarreling all day about the position of deputy guardian, and they all wanted their own disciples to take over. After all, there were still many benefits to being a deputy guardian. Not to mention the increase in monthly salary, it would be easier to obtain merits. Yumei was not far from leaving her position. In other words, she would soon be promoted to the position of deputy guardian. After this matter was over, she had to quickly let the sect decide on a candidate for deputy guardian. Yumei secretly planned in her heart that this matter could not be delayed any longer. Just as she was thinking this, a warning sign suddenly appeared in her heart. At the same time, she caught a glimpse of a figure rapidly approaching her from the corner of her eye. She quickly turned her head to look and saw a young man with his head lowered. He was already within 10 meters of her. Yumei's hair instantly stood on end. She had never seen this young man before. As the guardian of Windflower Courtyard, even if she wasn't very familiar with the hundreds of people in the station, whether they were from the main sect, outer sect, or attached rogue cultivators, she could at least recognize them and call out their names. It could be said that in the entire Windflower Courtyard, only she and the dead Chuqing knew everyone, because whether the cultivators were from the outside or attached rogue cultivators, they all had to go through the two of them to enter the station. Although the young man had his head lowered, Yumei could still roughly see his appearance. So, she was sure that she had never seen this young man before. Even before today, this young man had never appeared in the main sect station. Thinking of the trace of abnormality just now, Yumei immediately raised her hand and pointed to the side. A light burst out from her fingertip and a spirit technique flew towards the approaching person. Yumei's strength was quite good. Just this instant spirit technique was enough to see her foundation. The power of this spirit technique wasn't too strong, but it was enough to repel most 8th order cultivators. However, after activating the spirit technique, Yumei didn't feel the slightest sense of security. On the contrary, she was even more frightened because the moment she raised her hand, the young man's figure had already turned into an afterimage. At the same time she released her spirit technique, a snow-white blade flashed before her eyes. Death was like a vicious beast, stretching out its bloody tongue and licking her soul, causing her to tremble. An ear-piercing sound of friction rang out as various scenes flashed before Yumei's eyes. A copious amount of force came from her throat, the impact almost breaking her cervical vertebra. A bright fluorescent light scattered as the blade slid across her neck, causing her throat to feel a slight pain. Yumei immediately came back to her senses. Just now, she had almost instinctively urged her spirit chi to condense a barrier around her neck. She didn't even know why she had done so. However, it was undeniable that this instinctive action had saved her life because Lu Ye's blade had been aimed at her neck. The fluorescent light that had exploded was the spirit chi barrier that had been shattered. The spirit chi barrier used by spirit chi cultivators was somewhat similar to the defensive spirit rune. It could provide a powerful defensive ability. It could be considered a spirit technique, so basically every spirit chi cultivator could use it. Since his blade didn't succeed, Lu Yi immediately activated his plan. The mountain coiling saber in his hand flashed brilliantly as he fiercely stabbed forward. In his plan, as long as he could get within 5 meters of Yumei and launch a sneak attack, there was an 80% chance that he would be able to kill her. However, reality was always somewhat different from what he had expected. Yumei's vigilance was too strong, and her reaction was very fast, causing him to be unable to use his full strength. Although he had injured Yumei, that kind of injury wasn't enough to take her life. Now that he was in the enemy's camp, he had to end the battle quickly. At most, he would only have one more chance to attack before he would be besieged by the Windflower Courtyard cultivators who had reacted. As such, he didn't aim his second attack to kill Yumei, so he didn't fail again. When Lu Ye's second attack came, Yumei hastily retreated. At the same time, she raised her hand and pointed a slender finger at Lu Yi. The spirit chi around her body surged. She clearly didn't know what kind of spirit chi technique she was going to use. Without waiting for her to activate the spirit chi technique, Lu Ye's blade had already pierced through her other arm. A muffled groan sounded out and the intense pain caused Yumei's face to distort. The mountain coiling saber stirred and half of her arm flew off. Yumei's expression immediately changed and she angrily roared, "Kill him!" Lu Yi spread his wings and soared into the sky, grabbing the severed arm at the same time. At that moment, the surrounding Windflower Courtyard cultivators finally realized what had happened. It wasn't that they were slow, but rather that Lu Ye's movements were too fast. He had only attacked twice in total and his confrontation with Yumei had only lasted for 2 breaths of time. In these short 2 breaths of time, who would be able to figure out what had happened? Once Yumei's order was given, streaks of light blossomed from the hands of the Windflower Courtyard cultivators. However, Lu Yi had already soared into the sky. The streaks of light following behind him were all 300 to 400 feet away, the limit of Spirit Chi technique. The range of the Spirit Chi technique's attack was much greater, but Lu Yi wouldn't just stand there and act as a target. The fiery red streaks of light on his wings gently flapped, nimbly dodging one Spirit Chi technique after another. Yumei's face paled as she stared at the figure flying in the sky. When she saw her opponent throw away her severed arm, the blood in her entire body instantly turned cold. She realized what her opponent wanted to do. "Return to the 9 provinces," she shouted. Quickly, everyone returned to the 9 provinces. It had to be said that Yumei was an extremely decisive woman. Even if one of her arms was severed and the pain was corroding her soul, she still made the most correct decision in an instant. It could only be said that none of the guardian envoys of the various large sects were stupid. They all had their own abilities. Hearing her order, the Windflower Courtyard cultivators were stunned. The defensive spirit array was still there, and there was only one cultivator who had invaded their sect. Moreover, he was only an 8th order cultivator. Why did they have to abandon their sect and return to the 9 provinces? But soon, someone realized where the problem lay. The defensive spirit array was indeed still there, but the jade ring that controlled it was gone. The reason why Lu Ye's second attack had cut off Yumei's arm was because she was holding the spirit array jade ring in her hand and was constantly adjusting the power of the spirit array. The most important thing to attacking the Windflower Courtyard was to destroy the jade ring. As long as this was done, the defensive spirit array of the Windflower Courtyard would collapse on its own. "Quick, quick!" Yumei shouted as she took the lead and ran towards the Divine Secret Hall. Seeing this, the Windflower Courtyard cultivators didn't dare to hesitate and followed her. Lu Yi, who was hovering in the air, pinched the jade ring with all his might, but he couldn't crush it. This thing looked like it was carved out of a piece of jade, but he didn't know what it was actually made of. Time was of the essence, so he didn't have the heart to make any more attempts. He gently threw the jade ring in front of him and immediately stabbed out with his saber. 2 sharpness instantly appeared on the saber. Chapter 295. With a soft crash, the jade pendant shattered. Without the jade pendant's control, the Windflower Courtyard's protective formation buzzed, and the spiritual power flowing on the light screen stopped. Although it was not broken, it could no longer be replenished with spiritual power. The 800 cultivators from the Shin'in Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace launched a round of fierce attacks, and the formation enveloping the encampment was shattered. Under the night sky, a large amount of fluorescent light scattered in all directions like fireflies dancing in the sky. "Kill!" Gu Kanyang roared angrily and took the lead, leading his subordinates to charge into the encampment of the Windflower Courtyard. At this moment, the cultivators of the Windflower Courtyard had only run less than 500 feet. Hearing the commotion behind them, they looked back and saw that the cultivators of the Windflower Courtyard were all scared out of their wits, and they ran even faster. Although most of them were female cultivators, no enemy would show mercy to them just because they were female cultivators. The group of people rushed into the Tianji Hall in a hustle and bustle. With the help of the Tianji Pillar, they returned to their sects in 9 prefectures one after another. However, the Tianji Pillar was only so big, and it would take some time for nearly 400 people to return. By the time the cultivators from the Shenin Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace arrived, there were still nearly 100 people who had not returned in time. The group of people who fell behind tried their best to resist, but 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. In an instant, their line of defense was broken through, and they fell into a pool of blood. After a dozen breaths, the battle subsided, and dozens of corpses lay scattered in the Tianji Hall. They were all cultivators of the Windflower Courtyard. These dozens of unlucky people ran the slowest, and they died the most miserable deaths. They perfectly demonstrated the truth that when danger came, they did not need to run faster than the enemy, but only faster than their companions. Awesome! Gu Kanyang laughed loudly. As neighboring forces, the Shenin Palace and the Windflower Courtyard had accumulated resentment for a long time, and they did not see eye to eye with each other. However, in the past, neither of them had the means to determine the outcome of the battle, so neither of them could do anything to the other. But today, good news came from the heavens and helped them defeat the Windflower Courtyard. The only thing that made him feel regretful was that he did not kill many people from the Windflower Courtyard. From the beginning to the end, there was not much fighting. In the end, the dozens of people from the Windflower Courtyard died because they did not have time to return to 9 prefectures. However, it was enough. Attacking the Windflower Manor's encampment would allow them to strip the Heaven's Fate Pillar of their blessings. This was something that the Windflower Manor had accumulated for generations. When the time came, the contribution points they would obtain would definitely not be small. Hurry up and clean up the battlefield. I'll give you the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. After that, gather. Zhou Pei shouted, his face flushed red. According to the plan, if the Windflower Yard could be broken, the next target would be the Saint Sun Mountain. The Saint Sun Mountain and the Overcloud Palace were neighbors. As for the grudge between the Saint Sun Mountain and the Saint Sun Mountain previously, when Gu Kanyang had discussed this plan with him, his greatest concern was whether Lu Yi could successfully infiltrate and whether he could succeed after infiltrating. The result proved that all his worries were unnecessary. Lu Yi of the Blue Blood sect was more reliable than he had imagined. Hearing his shouts, the cultivators of the 2 sects immediately took action. There wasn't much time left, so it was naturally more important for them to plunder as soon as possible. "Where's Brother Ye?" Gu Kanyang shouted. "Here." Lu Yi walked in from outside the Tianji Hall. Beside him was Yi, who was checking if he was injured. After leaving the Celestial Origin City, Yi fell into a deep sleep and only woke up half a month ago. Compared to the past, Yi had changed a lot. The most obvious point was that no matter who saw her now, she was no different from an ordinary person. Even second senior sister might not be able to see any flaws. It wasn't possible in the past. In the past, people with high cultivation like the second senior martial sister could see through Yi at a glance. If the benefits that Lu Yi and the giant armored Hooper obtained from the soul cleansing pond were 1, then the benefits that Yi obtained from the soul cleansing pond were 4 or even 5. That was because the soul cleansing pond was the place where many souls were hibernating in the immortal Essence City. For a soul like Yi, the benefits that she obtained from the soul cleansing pond were much greater than Lu Yi and the others. If it wasn't for her identity as a Bai Ling, which prevented her cultivation from surpassing Hu Po's, her cultivation would probably be much higher than Lu Ye's. "Brother Ye, please." Gu Kanyang smiled and gestured with his hand. Now that the Windflower Court's encampment had been taken, the next step was naturally to divide the benefits. According to the previous agreement, the blessings on the Tianji Pillar would be divided equally between the 3 parties. Lu Yi didn't stand on ceremony. He raised his hand and pressed it on the Tianji pillar, activating his battlefield imprint and plundering. He had done this once at the Sky Pillar sect, so he was quite familiar with it. As the various blessings on the Tianji pillar were taken away, the concentration of heaven and earth spirit qi in the Windflower Court's encampment began to decrease. At the same time, the range of the encampment's radiation also began to shrink. When he felt that it was about time, Lu Yi withdrew his hand. Gu Kanyang continued, and it was Zhou Pei's turn. Half an hour later, everyone gathered at the square in front of the Tianji Hall. They boarded the ship again and set off for Mount Sunlight. Halfway through the journey, Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei received news at the same time that a large number of myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were attacking their encampments. This was obviously a common trick used by both parties. The myriad Devil Ridge was trying to use this method to force the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace to retreat and save the Windflower Court from being besieged. If it were in the past, the two parties wouldn't have a good solution because they definitely wouldn't be able to take down the Windflower Court's encampment in a short period of time. Forcefully attacking the enemy's great formation would only exhaust their own strength and weaken their own strength, giving the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of. However, those myriad Devil Ridge cultivators probably didn't know that the Windflower Court's encampment had been taken down, and the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace had already eaten their fill and sent their troops to Mount Sunlight. It was too fast, so fast that even the Windflower Court didn't have time to react. How could the other myriad Devil Ridge forces know about it? Therefore, even though they received the news from their own sect's cultivators, Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei didn't pay attention to it. They only ordered the people guarding the encampment to strengthen the great formation and wait for their triumphant return. Half an hour later, more news came. Those myriad Devil Ridge forces had actually retreated for some unknown reason. Moreover, judging from their hurried manner, it seemed that they were in a hurry to retreat. On the big ship, Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei met. They realized that the news of the Windflower Court's encampment being taken down must have been leaked. Otherwise, those myriad Devil Ridge forces wouldn't have retreated so quickly. That was indeed the case. When Yumei ordered the Windflower Court's cultivators to retreat to the land of the 9 continents, she didn't have time to send a message to the myriad Devil Ridge forces nearby. When she returned to the land of the 9 continents, the first thing she did was to find a way to contact the guardian envoys of those forces. After a lot of twists and turns, she finally sent the message. There was no way to directly send messages to the 9 continents and the Spirit Stream battlefield. Messages needed to be transferred. For example, Yumei would first send a message to the cultivators of those forces in the land of the 9 continents, and then those cultivators would send the message to the people of those sects in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Naturally, the message wouldn't be transmitted that quickly. When those guardian envoys received the message, they were all dumbfounded. The reason why they sent their troops to attack the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace was to help the Windflower Court and force the people of the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace to come back. As long as they came back, the Windflower Court's crisis would be resolved. However, the Windflower Court's encampment was actually taken down in such a short time. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't get in touch with Yumei, they really wanted to ask her if the Windflower Court's defensive array was made of paper. No one's defensive array could be broken so quickly. Now that the Windflower Court's encampment was taken down, it was meaningless for them to attack the encampments of the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Soaring Palace. What made them even more frightened was another piece of news from the Windflower Court. Lu Ye of the Blue Blood sect had the means to sneak into the defensive array without anyone noticing. The reason why the Windflower Court's encampment fell so quickly was because Yumei had been sneak attacked by him and lost her jade slit, causing the defensive array to be broken. The guardian envoys of the myriad Demon Ridge forces panicked and realized where the problem lay. There was no problem with the Windflower Court's defensive array, but there was a problem with the Blue Blood sect's Lu Ye. With his 8th Order Spirit Stream realm cultivation, sneaking into the defensive array without anyone noticing was something that had never happened before. Their defensive arrays were not much weaker than the Windflower Court's. Since Lu Ye could sneak into the Windflower Court's defensive array, their defensive arrays would certainly not be able to stop him. especially the Sunlight Mountain. Because of what happened in the Immortal Essence City, they had more or less formed a personal grudge with Liu Ye. Now that the Windflower Court's encampment was gone, wouldn't the Sunlight Mountain be next? In such a situation, who dared to stay outside? Naturally, they all retreated. If they didn't retreat, their encampment would be gone. While the cultivators of the Sunlight Mountain were rushing back under the lead of their deputy, a message came from the direction of their encampment. The people of the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud-Soaring Palace had indeed returned to their encampments and were crazily attacking the defensive array at the moment. The deputy almost vomited blood. He hurriedly ordered the cultivators under his command to speed up. At the same time, he secretly cursed his senior brother for not changing his mind. Yume had sent him a message saying that their encampment was under attack, so he had asked him to lead more than 300 people to help. There were only about 400 cultivators in the Sunlight Mountain, and only 100 were left in the encampment. If Liu Ye broke the defensive array, how could they defend themselves? Hurriedly rushing back to the encampment, he saw the colorful lights flashing from afar. He felt so depressed, but he only dared to watch from afar. He didn't dare to go forward. He had more than 300 people on his side, while the enemy only had 800. Rushing forward like this was no different than courting death. He didn't even dare to expose his whereabouts. He didn't want to draw fire to himself. At the same time, outside the defensive array of the Sunlight Mountain, the cultivators of the Hidden God Palace and the Overcloud Palace were attacking the defensive array in batches. It seemed they were going to break the defensive array. Inside the defensive array, the cultivators of the Sunlight Mountain were patrolling in small groups under the arrangement of their deputy, in case Liu Ye sneaked in without them noticing. Beside the deputy, there were a few cultivators standing in a circle, vigilantly guarding the surroundings. According to the message from Yume, although Liu Ye was only in the 8th level, he was extremely powerful. He only made 2 slashes to her. One of the slashes almost beheaded her, and the other cut off her arm. That was how she lost the defensive array Jade Slit Ring. This guardian of the Sunlight Mountain used to be a vice guardian. After the previous guardian, Qi Ming, died in the Immortal Essence City, he took over Qi Ming's position. He had some dealings with Yume, so he knew how powerful she was. If Yume couldn't take 2 slashes from Liu Ye, he didn't have the confidence to do so. So, even though he was in a difficult situation, he had to deal with this crisis with utmost caution. Chapter 296. Liu Ye, who was hiding in the dark, couldn't do anything about it. After observing for a while, he was sure that he couldn't do what he did in the Windflower Yard again, so he showed himself. News spread among cultivators too fast. Apparently, what he did in the Windflower Yard had reached the Mount Sunlight. Otherwise, the Mount Sunlight wouldn't have made such a careful arrangement. Liu Ye sighed in his mind. It seemed that he couldn't sneak into the enemy's base and steal the Jade Slit Ring anymore. People of the Shenin Palace and the Overcloud Palace were attacking the defensive formation under the command of Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei. Liu Ye showed himself in the dark and walked over step by step. Seeing this, Zhou Pei's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly went forward. "Brother Yi, you can't get in?" Liu Ye shook his head. Not only could he not enter, even if he did, it would be difficult for him to do anything alone. The main reason he was able to snatch the Jade Slit Ring from Yume's hands was because no one had ever done this before. The Windflower Courtyard was completely defenseless against this, so Liu Ye was able to brazenly approach within 10 meters of Yume. If Yume wasn't careful enough and didn't react fast enough, she would have died. Things were different now. After the news that he could sneak into the defensive formation spread out, the Mount Sunlight Yard had tightened the defense. There were even several cultivators around the Guardian. Under such circumstances, Liu Ye couldn't steal the Jade Slit Ring anymore. Zhou Pei looked bitter. If they could take over the Mount Sunlight Yard, the Overcloud Palace would have a much better life in the future. Take the Shenin Palace as an example. The Windflower Yard didn't lose a lot of cultivators, but the loss of the Tianji Pillar couldn't be recovered in a short time. The spiritual qi in the Windflower Yard wasn't strong enough. Even if the Windflower Yard set up a new defensive formation, it wouldn't be as powerful as before. In other words, The Windflower Yard would be suppressed by the Shunin Palace in the future. They might never be able to rise again. The Shunin Palace wouldn't give the Windflower Yard a chance to rise again. The Windflower Yard was arranged. Zhou Pei wanted to do the same for the Mount Sunlight Yard. However, things didn't go as he wished. He was a bit disappointed. If it doesn't work, we can just attack, Gu Kenyang said. The two sects had gathered 800 people. It was not impossible for them to attack the mountain by force. However, it would take them some time. It might take them a few days to break the formation of the mountain. In the past, such a thing would have been impossible because the nearby forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge would have definitely come to help or take other actions. However, which force of the Myriad Devil Ridge would dare to act rashly? With the example of the Windflower Yard, no one dared to rashly attack again. They all holed up in their own encampments, just in case something unexpected happened. If Lu Ye sneaked into their encampments while they were supporting others, they would have nowhere to cry. There is another way, Lu Yi said slowly. Zhou Pei's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly asked, "What method?" "I can't guarantee that this method will succeed. I can only say that there is a certain chance. It's fine as long as there's a chance. As for the specifics, I'll leave it to Brother Ye to arrange. Then find 9 body cultivators. I want the strongest body cultivators from your two sects to wear whatever defensive spirit artifacts you can." Although Gu Kenyang and Zhou Pei did not know what Lu Yi wanted to do, since he had made the request, they would naturally fulfill it. Soon, the 9 body cultivators selected from the two sects stood in front of Lu Yi. He looked up and found that all 9 of them were tall and sturdy. They were full of qi and blood. 2 of them were even beast cultivators. At this moment, the 9 of them were holding defensive spirit artifacts in their hands and wearing defensive armor on their bodies. All of them looked awe-inspiring. Lu Yi called Giant Armor over. Giant Armor stood to the side. The 9 body cultivators looked at him with burning eyes. In terms of size, Giant Armor was not the biggest among the 10, but in terms of qi and blood, he was the most abundant. Among the 9, the one with the strongest qi and blood was weaker than Giant Armor. Giant Armor was a famous figure. Naturally, he was sought after by the body cultivators of the nearby sections. No one would look down on him because of his background as a loose cultivator. There was a saying within 1,000 miles. If Giant Armor didn't exist, Sima Yang would have died countless times. Because of Giant Armor's protection, Sima Yang could live such a comfortable life. Now, many people knew that Sima Yang was dead. Even though they were also from the Haotian Alliance, many of them were celebrating. They felt happy that Giant Armor was free from this burden. The only problem was that Giant Armor followed Lu Yi, so he wasn't recruited by the other sections. Lu Yi led the 10 body cultivators, including Giant Armor, to the node of the formation. He arranged them aside and gave them some instructions. Everyone hurriedly responded. Giant Armor even lowered its body slightly and got into a charging posture. Lu Yi glanced at him and didn't stop him. Then he raised one hand and covered the light screen in front of him. His movement was so obvious. How could the Sunlight Mountain not take precautions? Over 80 cultivators under the lead of the chief guardian of the Sunlight Mountain immediately came to the place. They stood opposite Lu Yi and the others on the light screen. These cultivators were all activating their spiritual power. The spiritual weapons in their hands were shining. They were ready to make the most powerful strike at any time. Seeing Lu Yi put his hand on the light screen, the cultivators of the Sunlight Mountain all felt their hearts in their throats. They had all heard that this man named Lu Ye could sneak into the defensive formation of other sects without being noticed. When they saw what Lu Yi was doing, they all guessed that he was going to do something weird. They were nervous and uneasy, but they were curious about how Lu Yi could sneak into the formation. That was why they didn't even blink. Outside the formation, the 10 body cultivators were ready. Inside the formation, the 80 cultivators were ready. Compared to the other side, it was quiet, but it was more oppressive. The spiritual power gathered in Lu Ye's eyes. With the help of the spiritual tattoo of insight, the world in Lu Ye's sight changed. The yin-yang qi on the formation was clear. Spiritual energy surged out of Lu Ye's body. With his hand as the center, foundation energy spread out, covering an area of 10 meters in the blink of an eye. From a distance, it looked as if Lu Yi had placed a layer of spiritual energy on top of the formation's light screen. The cultivators of the Sunlight Mountain all felt their hearts beating faster. They all exclaimed in their hearts, "Is this how Lu Yi sneaked into the defensive formation?" A nervous cultivator even directly activated his imperial equipment, which turned into a stream of light and blasted onto the defensive formation of his own home. His action caused a chain reaction. At least half of the 80 cultivators followed him. Streams of light hit on the light screen and made the light screen ripple. Lu Yi looked at the cultivators expressionlessly and dispersed the spiritual power in his hand. The cultivators of the Sunlight Mountain who rushed to attack realized it. They all looked embarrassed. The first attempt failed. Because he didn't have the confidence to break the formation this way, he didn't promise Zhou Pei anything. Strictly speaking, what Lu Yi was doing at the moment was breaking the formation, which was also the direction of his initial research. However, as he worked at the Shenin Palace, the direction of his research changed. In the end, it became a method of disguising himself without destroying the formation and deceiving the formation to sneak in. Compared to the former, the latter was undoubtedly easier. Although the direction of the research had changed, this method was correct. It was just that Lu Yi was unable to seize that short opportunity because the fundamental elements on the light screen of the formation were constantly changing. The more the formation's power was activated, the faster the frequency of the changes. Take the great formation of Mount Sunlight as an example. It had been pushed to the limit. The frequency of changes had already reached the level of one change every 3 breaths. In other words, if Lu Yi wanted to achieve his goal, he had to clearly see the composition of the foundational elements at the nodes of the formation within 3 breaths of time. Then he had to use his own spiritual power to construct a completely opposite foundational element and merge it with it. In this way, he could directly break a hole in the node and achieve his goal of breaking the formation. Within 3 breaths, he had to see the structure of hundreds of qi and build a completely opposite qi. How difficult it was! Even though Lu Yi had great control over his spiritual power and was talented in the art of spiritual tattoos, he still needed some luck to do it. Of course, the insight spiritual tattoos was his biggest source of confidence. If he didn't have the insight spiritual tattoos to see through the changes of the formation, he would have to cultivate for a few more years to break such a great formation. It didn't matter if he failed once. There was a second time, a third time. He could fail as many times as he wanted. He wouldn't lose anything. However, as long as he succeeded once, it would be a disaster for the Sunlight Mountain. After calming down his spiritual power, Lu Yi kept watching the changes of the formation. After a while, he tried again and failed again. He didn't have much time left. In the beginning, every time Lu Yi tried to break the formation, the 80 cultivators of the Sunlight Mountain would be scared. However, as time went by, they were almost numb to it. They didn't think Lu Yi couldn't break the formation, but they just didn't feel good about it. Their hearts were going up and down with Lu Yi's every move. They had already lost their minds. As Lu Yi failed again, Zhu Jia slowly stood up. He had been bending for a long time, so he was a bit tired. But soon he bent down again and got into the posture of a warrior. Perhaps it was because he had been with Sima Yang for too long, so he usually didn't have his own opinions. However, if someone gave him clear instructions and told him to do something, he would be able to meticulously and perfectly execute it. Lu Yi tried a few more times but still failed. He had done his best, but he still couldn't break the formation within 3 breaths. Perhaps he would have the ability to do so after he switched to a heaven-tier cultivation method. This was because after a cultivator switched to a heaven-tier cultivation method, their control over their own spirit force would increase greatly. This was also the reason why a cultivator's strength would increase greatly after switching to a heaven-tier cultivation method. Chapter 297. When Lu Yi was about to give up, he was pleasantly surprised. The foundational elements of the formation changed again, but this time, a part of the foundational elements gave Lu Yi a very familiar feeling. Almost instantly, he understood where this feeling came from. There were many leaves on the talent tree that carried some special spiritual patterns. Those patterns weren't sharp or defensive. They couldn't help Lu Yi much in battle or cultivation. They were more like a kind of method and skill. Lu Yi had learned a lot from those patterns. The reason why he could improve so fast in the art of spiritual patterns was because of those methods and skills. At this moment, the foundational elements on the nodes of the formation were actually the veins on one of the leaves of the talent tree. Without any hesitation, Lu Yi immediately built the pattern. More and more foundation of the foundation spread out. When all the foundation of the formation was built, a light sound sounded like a bubble bursting. As the sound sounded, the light screen in front of Lu Yi was broken, and there was a big hole that was about 3 meters wide. "Get in!" Lu Yi shouted. Almost at the same time when he shouted, Zhu Jia had rushed out. He stepped over the big hole in the formation and rushed into the base of the Mount Sunlight sect. Lu Yi followed closely behind him. When he rushed into the formation, the 9 body cultivators finally realized what was going on. They hurriedly followed him. The hole was mended quickly. The defensive formation had the ability to repair itself. Unless the damage was too severe, it would quickly repair itself. Lu Yi had only managed to break a hole in such a large defensive formation. Naturally, it wouldn't affect the formation's foundation. The 80 body cultivators of the Mount Sunlight sect were frightened. They started to attack one after another out of instinct. Earlier, when Lu Yi had been unable to break through the formation no matter how hard he tried, their hearts had fluctuated as well. They felt extremely tormented. However, when Lu Yi actually managed to create a hole in the formation and kill his way in, they discovered that the torment was basically a form of bliss, as they were about to face the attacks of the 10 body cultivators led by Zhu Jia right now. Their blood and qi were boiling. The surface of every body cultivator's body was suffused with a dark red glow, especially giant armor. The attacks that came from the front rumbled and hit his body, but most of them were blocked by the blood and qi that filled the surface of his body. Only a few landed on his body, but their power was greatly reduced. He lowered his head and held a big shield in his hand. Like a mad bull, he fiercely rushed into the crowd of cultivators from Mount Sunlight. Lu Yi, who was following closely behind him, reached into his storage pouch and threw out 4 streaks of light, which converged into a belt of light and cut through the waves, opening a path for the giant armor. After returning from the celestial origin city, Lu Ye's divine soul's strength had increased greatly, and his control of his own spiritual energy had reached a higher level. The number of imperial artifacts he could control had increased from 2 to 4, and this was not his limit. However, considering that if he controlled more imperial artifacts, their power would decrease, so he did not refine more imperial artifacts. The other 9 body cultivators also charged forward. With giant armor in the lead, they formed a sharp formation, protecting Lu Yi in the middle as they charged forward. "Stop them!" Some cultivators from Mount Sunlight shouted, but it did not work. Even though they outnumbered Lu Yi by 8 times, it was still difficult to stop the enemy's rapid advance. Giant armor's ability to charge forward was too strong. Once he started to charge forward, no one in the spiritual stream stage could stop him, unless they had the ability to kill him. On the other side, Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei heard the noise and flew up to the sky together. They looked toward the encampment of Mount Sunlight. The 10 body cultivators were like a flood, fiercely cutting a bloody path in the encampment of Mount Sunlight. Both of them were dazzled. "We did it!" Gu Kanyang was a bit absent-minded. Lu Ye's side had not made any moves for a long time. He thought this operation was going to end in failure. Unexpectedly, they suddenly charged into the encampment of Mount Sunlight. This time, Lu Yi was not alone. He had brought 10 strong body cultivators with him. What a great general! Zhou Pei looked at giant armor with red eyes. He was envious in his heart. The towering cloud palace had tried to recruit giant armor before, but it was rejected by that bastard Sima Yang. He couldn't possibly kidnap him and force him to join his sect. That would be unseemly. If he really did that, he wouldn't be able to guarantee giant armor's loyalty. It might even backfire. Luckily, after Sima Yang died, such a great general fell into Lu Ye's hands. Breaking the formation and charging into Mount Sunlight's encampment was just the beginning. The real test was yet to come. The gap in the formation had been fixed. In other words, Lu Yi and the others had no way to retreat. They were led by giant armor, so they could be brave for a while. However, they were outnumbered. There were only 11 of them, while Mount Sunlight had over 100. If they wanted to live, they had to snatch the formation jade pendant from Mount Sunlight's hands as fast as they could. They had to break the formation and let the 800 cultivators of the two sects in. That was why the 11 of them kept rushing forward. They didn't want to get entangled with the 80 cultivators at all. No matter how hard the cultivators of Mount Sunlight tried to stop them, they couldn't stop such a group of people. Within 10 breaths, the 11 of them had broken the defense line of Mount Sunlight's cultivators like a sharp knife. They didn't stop, just kept rushing forward. The cultivators of Mount Sunlight were roaring and chasing after them. Their attacks hit on the body cultivators, making clashing sounds. The defensive armors and spiritual tools that were worn in advance provided a very strong defense, but no matter how outstanding the armors and spiritual tools were, they could not withstand this kind of continuous attack. An individual cultivator's body flashed with light. That was the sound of the armors or the defensive spiritual tools being broken. The shield in giant armor's hand also became tattered, and he threw it aside. It should be known that this large shield spirit tool was given to him by Lu Yi in Immortal Essence City. It was a 9-restriction spirit tool with outstanding defensive ability. However, in just a short while, this 9-restriction spirit tool was almost scrapped. It could be seen how fierce the enemy's attack was. Then he silently took out another large shield spirit artifact from his storage pouch. In the past, when he followed Sima Yang, in order to earn enough merit points, Sima Yang would never equip the giant armor with a spirit weapon because each spirit weapon was expensive. But since he followed Lu Yi, he could get as many spirit weapons as he wanted. Giant armor always had 4 or 5 defensive spiritual weapons in his storage pouch. Luckily, the most dangerous moment was over. The 11 of them had broken through the defense line of the 80 cultivators of Mount Sunlight. They kept rushing forward. However, they couldn't get rid of the pursuers. The body cultivators at the back knew that none of them could get away if it kept going on like this. They made up their minds and turned around to fight the enemies. One of them shouted, "You go first." They fought against dozens of enemies with only a few of them. That was really a brave move. However, they couldn't make up for the difference in numbers. After only a few breaths, those body cultivators at the back fell in a pool of blood. Gu Kanyang and Zhou Pei's eyes turned red when they saw that. One had to know that these selected body cultivators were the strongest body cultivators in their sect. Every one of them was a rare talent. Losing any one of them would be a great loss. Now, several of them had fallen. How could they not feel heartache? The enemies were in a hurry to kill Lu Yi and the others, so they didn't kill them all. However, nobody knew whether those body cultivators were still alive or not. Lu Yi and the others had run 1,000 zhang away while those body cultivators had bought them some time. They saw over 30 cultivators of Mount Sunlight who were in a panic. One of them was surrounded by the others. He couldn't believe it. It seemed he didn't expect his sect's defensive formation to be broken. Lu Yi stared at him and realized that he should be the guardian of Mount Sunlight. The jade pendant should be in his hand. His target was clear. He wanted to take the jade pendant from this man and destroy it. Then the 800 cultivators outside would be able to kill their way in. Stop them! The guardian of Mount Sunlight saw Zhu Jia and the others rushing over. He didn't know it was a matter of life and death. As he gave the order, streams of light shot out from the direction of Mount Sunlight. Giant armor roared and raised its shield high to block the attack coming from the front. The light on the shield dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and its charging figure was greatly reduced due to the great resistance. His momentum was stopped. The enemies were getting closer and closer. They were about to be attacked from the front and the back. Once the situation developed to this point, Lu Yi, Giant Jia, and the others would not be far from death. The red spiritual power flowed out. Lu Yi opened his wings and flew up to the sky. He attracted everybody's attention. The streams of light started to change their direction and attacked Lu Yi. Lu Yi grabbed Hupo, who had been crouching on his shoulder. He exerted force on his wrist and threw Hupo, who was as long as a cat, forward. Two streams of light brushed past Hupo's small body, bringing out a puff of blood. Hupo's demonic chi was rolling. The yellow demonic chi was rolling. Hupo's body suddenly expanded and turned into a majestic white tiger. With the strength of Lu Ye's throw, it rushed to the 30 cultivators of Mount Xingri within a second. The amber tiger eyes reflected the figures of many people, as if they had the ability to capture souls. Every cultivator who met those tiger eyes couldn't help but feel an indescribable killing force, and their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Roar! Hupa opened his mouth and let out a deafening tiger's roar. Air waves visible to the naked eye swept forward with a loud bang. Along with the tiger's roar, it was like an invisible hammer hitting on the heads of the cultivators of Mount Sunlight. They were all absent-minded. They even felt pain in their heads. A long time ago, Lu Yi had noticed that there was some special power in Hupo's roar. However, he was still weak at that time, so he didn't know what it was. Sometimes, he couldn't even be sure if the power existed. But today, as his cultivation base and vision improved, he more or less understood the use of the amber howl. It was a power that targeted the soul. Chapter 298. It wasn't strange that Hupo's howl had such power. He could transform the nightmare spirit, which was formed from the soul. That was why he had some incomprehensible means to deal with the soul. It might be his instinct, or it might be his talent. In the soul-cleansing pool, Lu Yi benefited from it, and so did Giant Carapace and Hupo also benefited from it, which made his howl even louder than before. When the whistling sound was heard, the cultivators of Mount Shrouding Sun were all shocked. Their attacks were all weakened, and some of their weapons fell down from the sky uncontrollably. E flew out from Hupo's body. When she raised her hands, a huge spiritual power disk appeared above her head. The disk was full of complicated patterns, which looked very mysterious. In the next moment, golden arc-shaped slashes rained down from the disk like a torrential downpour. Outside the defensive formation, Gu Shenyang and Zhou Pei were dumbfounded as they watched the scene. They sensed the spiritual power ripples on Yi's body, then looked at the huge disk. They could not understand how Yi could cast such a large-scale art with her strength. Only magic cultivators who had switched to a heaven-grade cultivation method were qualified to use such a technique because only magic cultivators had such exquisite control over their own spiritual energy and such a deep reserve of spiritual energy. This was something that was impossible to happen, yet it had happened right under their noses. It was undoubtedly a huge blow to them. Hupe and Yi's cooperation could be said to be complementing each other. First, a tiger's roar attacked the enemy's mind and soul. Taking advantage of the fact that the enemy had yet to come back to their senses, he had already activated Golden Arc Rain. Under the Golden Arc Rain, several cultivators died on the spot, and the rest were in an incomparably sorry state. When the Golden Arc Rain fell, Lu Yi had already flapped his wings and dashed toward the guardian of Mount Shrouded Sunday. His whole body left a red belt of light in the sky. For streams of light flashed in front of him. Screams sounded one after another. The cultivators of Mount Shrouded Sun, who had been hit by the Golden Arc Rain, were all bleeding. The speed of the Imperial equipment was already extremely fast. After being enhanced by the wind travel spirit pattern, the speed was so fast that it was almost impossible to catch. Even if Lu Yi did not have more energy to enhance the sharpness, such an Imperial equipment was not something that the Inner Circle cultivators could block. However, although the wind-style spiritual tattoo could increase the power of the weapon, it could only last for a short time. The spiritual power stored in the weapon was limited. It was enough. When Lu Yi arrived in front of the guardian of Mount Shrouded Sun, over 10 of the 30 cultivators had fallen. Lu Yi pulled out the Pan Mountain saber from his waist and slashed down. The guardian was lucky. Although he was distracted by Hupo's whistling sound, Yi's attack didn't hurt him. He was surrounded by the others, so he was still unharmed. Facing Lu Ye's slash from above, the guardian grabbed the spirit weapon in his hand and used it to block in front of him. Then, his eyes widened and the spirit weapon in his hand flew out. At the same time, the web between his thumb and forefinger split open and he fell to his knees with a plop. Lu Ye's strength was much greater than his to begin with, so there was no way he would be able to withstand such a violent attack. However, Li didn't make the second slash. The enemy started to fight back. He wouldn't have the chance to make another slash. If he forced himself to make another slash, he would be in danger. That was why after the slash, Lu Yi flew up again with the help of the counterforce. Rumbling sounds could be heard. It was giant armor leading the rest of the physical cultivators over. They had been suppressed by the people of Mount Sunlight to the point where it was difficult for them to move forward. However, after Hu Pe and Yi's combined attacks, the pressure on their side was greatly reduced. When Lu Yi flew up again, they had just arrived in front of the enemy's formation. Under the desperate gaze of the cultivators of Mount Shrouded Sun, Zhu Jia and the other body cultivators rushed into the crowd. Everyone was thrown off their feet. Hoopa was also roaming around at the side. He found a target and pounced on it, clawing and biting. He did not use any more large-scale techniques, but every time she raised her hand, a technique would be unleashed. It was extremely powerful. In the chaos, Lu Yi had rushed down again. The guardian of Mount Shrouded Sun, who was kneeling on the floor, suddenly felt cold. He hurriedly stood up and looked up. He saw a flash of blade light in front of his eyes. His weapon was smashed away in the fight with Lu Yi, so he hurriedly punched at Lu Yi. The punch hit on Lu Ye's shoulder. Lu Ye's body tilted and bumped into the guardian. The two of them rolled on the floor. However, Lu Yi soon got up with a jade pendant in his hand. The guardian of Mount Shrouded Sun was lying on the floor, with blood flowing out from under his body. The jade pendant resonated with the base of the Great Formation, so it had to be carried with it. It couldn't be put into the storage pouch. Otherwise, the resonance would be cut off, and the Great Formation would stop working. The jade pendant was hanging on the waist of the guardian. Lu Yi had noticed it when he attacked the guardian. Now that the guardian was killed, the jade pendant naturally fell into Lu Ye's hand. He held the jade pendant in one hand and the saber in the other. He slashed down with the saber. Crack! The jade pendant broke, and the Great Formation buzzed. As the cultivators of the Shenin Palace and the Overcloud Palace kept attacking, the Great Formation was completely broken. Many cultivators rushed into Mount Shrouded Sun like tigers coming down from the mountains. The surviving cultivators of Mount Shrouded Sun panicked, running toward the Tianji Hall. Apparently, they wanted to go back to the land of the 9 provinces. They had no choice. The Great Formation was broken. If they didn't leave now, they would die. The cultivators of the two sects didn't kill many people before they looked around and found their enemies were all gone. However, there was another battle that was breaking out. The location of the battle was outside the defensive battle. It was a group of over 300 cultivators led by the deputy guardian of Mount Shrouded Sunday. They were ordered by their guardian to attack the base of the Overcloud Palace. They wanted to save the Windflower Yard. However, not long after they arrived, they heard that their base was attacked. They hurried back and saw 800 cultivators of the Shenin Palace and the Overcloud Palace. They didn't even dare to show their faces. They just hid somewhere nearby. However, when they saw Lu Yi breaking the Great Formation and leading 10 body cultivators into the base, the deputy guardian had to show himself, even though he knew it was not a good time to expose himself. Once the base was occupied, the consequences would be unimaginable. That was why he led over 300 cultivators to attack the Shenin Palace and the Overcloud Palace. He wanted to distract the cultivators of the two sections. However, not long after they started the fight, the Great Formation was broken. The light screen of the Great Formation disappeared in the air. The cultivators of the Mount Shrouded Sun were in despair. What they were worried about the most had happened, and there was nothing they could do about it. The Great Formation was broken, and the base was lost. There was no need to keep fighting. Besides, they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. As the deputy guardian gave the order, the cultivators of the Mount Shrouded Sun started to retreat. They wanted to leave the battlefield. How could the cultivators of the Shenin Palace and the Overcloud Palace agree? They had broken the bases of the two great sects, but the fight didn't last long. Most of the time, the cultivators of the two sects were attacking the Great Formation of the other sections. When the Great Formation of the Windflower Yard was broken, the cultivators of the Windflower Yard immediately returned to the land of the 9 regions under Yumei's order. That didn't give the cultivators of the two sects any chance to attack. Now that the Great Formation of the Mount-shrouded sun was broken, there were only dozens of cultivators left in the base. They all ran away. In other words, the cultivators of the two sects had nowhere to go. Over 300 cultivators of the Mount-shrouded sun actually dared to jump out. That was exactly what they wanted. Suddenly, the cultivators of the two sects kept chasing after the cultivators of the Mount-shrouded Sunday. Less than half of the 300 cultivators of the Mount-shrouded sun were left alive. In the end, the cultivators of the Mount-shrouded sun finally got rid of the pursuers of the two sections. If the two sects weren't worried about the enemy, they could have killed the cultivators of the Mount-shrouded Sunday. However, if they did that, they would suffer a lot of casualties. It wasn't worth it. The deputy guardian of the Mount-shrouded sun didn't die, but he must be regretting it so much. The reason why he led the cultivators of the Mount-shrouded sun was that he didn't want the Great Formation to be broken. However, in the end, he failed to protect the Great Formation and even caused a lot of his men to die. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have shown up. If the Great Formation was broken, so be it. As long as his men were alive, they would have a chance to rise again. What happened next was simple. The cultivators of the two sects started to loot the base of the Mount-shrouded Sunday. Lu Yi, Gu Shenyang, and Zhou Pei all got the support from the Tianji pillar. They all earned a lot. The only problem was that of the 10 body cultivators that Lu Yi brought with him, 4 died and 5 were severely injured. Only Zhu Jia was not seriously injured. That showed the gap between the body cultivators. Those body cultivators were the strongest in the two sections. They were no weaker than Zhu Jia. However, Zhu Jia, who was at the front of the battle, was fine. The other 9 were either dead or severely injured. It could be said that among the big sects of the cultivators, the body cultivator sect valued the innate talent the most. The other sects could accumulate it through hard work. However, body cultivators couldn't. If they didn't have the innate talent, they would die sooner or later even if they walked the path of body cultivator. Because when a war broke out, body cultivators would always be at the front. That was why the big sects took extra care of their own body cultivators. The resources that body cultivators could enjoy were relatively more than the other sections. Only when the body cultivators could resist the enemy's attacks would they have a chance to fight back. If the body cultivators couldn't resist, then what was the point of fighting back? Hua Ci once told Lu Yi that the body cultivators enjoyed the best resources and suffered the most vicious attacks. 2 hours later, the 2 ships rose into the sky one after another. The cultivators on the ships were laughing and chatting happily. Below the ships, there was a raging fire. After attacking the enemy's base, they would burn everything they could. This was almost the norm in the spiritual stream battlefield. After all, the two sects were like fire and water. Naturally, they would do whatever they could to annoy each other. The 2 ships parted ways halfway and returned to their respective sections. Chapter 299. After nearly 9 months, the name of Lu Ye from Blue Blood Sect was once again pushed to the forefront. Unlike the previous battle on Golden Light Peak, this time was even more serious. The reason for the battle on Golden Light Peak was that Myriad Demon Ridge wanted to completely remove Blue Blood Sect from the list of sects. So, many masters from the inner circle and even the core circle disregarded the rules and forced their way into the outer circle to eliminate Lu Yi. However, under the protection of Grand Heaven Alliance's sects, Lu Yi escaped again and again. In the end, the 2 sides confronted each other on Golden Light Peak. Lu Yi proposed that many Spirit Stream list masters sign a Heaven's Secret contract and set up an arena battle. In that battle, Lu Yi fought 43 battles in a row with his 5th order cultivation without a single defeat, slapping Myriad Demon Ridge's face until it was swollen. But in any case, Lu Yi was only a 5th order cultivator at that time. Even if he could kill enemies above his realm and show great potential, that was only his personal strength. There was a limit to an individual's strength. Myriad Demon Ridge was a little afraid of him because of this, but the true masters would not care about him unless Lu Yi could safely grow to the point where he could threaten them. There was never a lack of geniuses in this world, and there were countless geniuses who died young. But this time was different. What he did this time had nothing to do with his personal strength. The ability he showed was enough to pose a huge threat to any force. First, there was news from Windflower Courtyard that Blue Blood Sect's Lu Ye had used some unknown method to silently infiltrate the sect's defensive array and then snatch the array Jade Slit Ring from the hands of Windflower Courtyard's guardian envoy, breaking the array, causing Windflower Courtyard's sect to fall and suffer heavy losses. When the news spread, it caused an uproar in the 9 regions and the Spirit Stream battlefield. All the cultivators who heard the news, regardless of their cultivation or status, were dumbfounded. A little Spirit Stream realm cultivator had the ability to sneak into a sect's defensive array? There were indeed people who had done this, but they were all great cultivators who were proficient in array Dao and had extremely high attainments in it. How could a trivial Spirit Stream realm cultivator do this? At first, many people thought that Windflower Courtyard was exaggerating, or that the guardian who lost the sect's defensive array was shirking responsibility. Soon the second message came out. This time, it came from the Sunlight Mountain, which was not far away from the Windflower Yard. Saint Sun Mountain was breached too, less than a day after the Windflower Court's encampment was destroyed. According to the cultivators of Mount Sunlight who survived the battle, Lu Ye had a special method to break a hole in the perfect defensive formation and get into the formation. The reason why Saint Sunlight Mountain was breached was because of Lu Ye's sneak attack. He brought 10 body cultivators with him and killed the guardian of Saint Sunlight Mountain. The guardian of Saint Sunlight Mountain was robbed. One said that Lu Ye could quietly sneak into the spirit array, while the other said that he could forcibly break a hole in the spirit array. Although the statements were different, they all pointed to one thing, and that was that Lu Ye, who was only an 8th order Spirit Stream realm cultivator, indeed had very profound attainments in the Tao of spirit arrays, or rather, in the Tao of spirit arrays. Lu Yi was the root cause of the destruction of the 2 sects' encampments in the Myriad Demons Ridge. As for the cultivators from the Divine Hidden Palace and the Cloud Over Palace, almost no one mentioned it. At first, the news only spread in a small area, but in just half a day, everyone in the 9 states and the entire Spirit Stream battlefield knew about it. Because if this was true, it was too terrifying. The encampments of the major sects on the Spirit Stream battlefield all had their own defensive spirit arrays. With these spirit arrays, the cultivators would feel safe, just like how mortals would lock their doors when they went to sleep at night. But now, someone was actually able to open the door silently, or forcefully open a hole in the door, and then rush into your house, kill your people, and steal your food. This naturally caused panic. If the Battle of Golden Light Summit only allowed the Myriad Demons Ridge to see Lu Ye's great potential, then the destruction of the encampments of Windflower Courtyard and Cloud Over Palace made the Myriad Demons Ridge have a deep fear of him. This kind of fear couldn't be ignored even by Spirit Sea realm cultivators. In the entire 9 states, which ranked force didn't have an encampment on the Spirit Stream battlefield. The encampments were filled with a group of Spirit Stream realm cultivators. Lu Yi could casually sneak into their spirit array, or even make a hole in it. He was simply the nemesis of their defensive spirit array. If even the defensive spirit array couldn't provide a sense of security, then all the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge would be afraid in the future. Once the defensive spirit array was broken, it was only a matter of time before the encampment was taken over. Just as this matter continued to ferment, another matter was exposed. A few months ago, when the insect tide came, the encampments of the Heaven Fiend Hall and the Feng clan, which were adjacent to the Jade Blood Sect's encampment, were also taken over. The Feng clan suffered heavy casualties, and almost all of their Spirit Stream realm cultivators were killed. Although the encampment of the 2 sects was taken over because of the insect tide, anyone could see that Lu Ye was behind it. Because for so many years, the Heaven Fiend Hall and the Feng clan had been fine, but when Lu Ye went to the Jade Blood Sect's encampment, the 2 encampments were taken over? This was completely unreasonable. First, it was the Heaven Fiend Hall and the Feng clan in the outer circle, then the Windflower Courtyard and the Sunlight Mountain in the inner circle. In just a few months, Lu Ye had taken down 4 encampments of the Myriad Demons Ridge. Since ancient times, no cultivator had ever done such a thing in the Spirit Stream battlefield. At the Silver Light Island encampment, Guardian Luo Fu and Vice Guardian Qi Shi sat opposite each other with complicated expressions. More than 2 months ago, when Lu Yi left Silver Light Island, Qi Shi had said that some of the Myriad Demons Ridge forces might be unlucky. In the end, his words came true. After more than 2 months, some of the Myriad Demons Ridge forces were really unlucky, and 2 of them at once. The Myriad Demons Ridge still didn't know that the Sky Pillar Sect encampment was taken over by Lu Yi, but at that time, Lu Yi had borrowed the power of the Winged Flood Dragon to forcibly break the Sky Pillar Sect's defensive spirit array, which was different from the method he used this time. If the Sky Pillar Sect was included, there were a total of 5 encampments in the Myriad Demons Ridge that were taken over by Lu Yi. What was certain was that Lu Yi didn't have such means more than 2 months ago, otherwise, he would have used it on that day. That fellow cultivator Lu is only in the 8th order now, Qi Shi suddenly said leisurely. Luo Fu glanced at him. What does junior brother want to say? Qi Shi said, according to the rules, fellow cultivator Lu can move about in the inner circle before he reaches the 7th order heaven grade. Even if he reaches the 7th order heaven grade, he doesn't have to completely leave the inner circle. I estimate that with fellow cultivator Lu's cultivation speed, it will take him at least a year and a half to reach the 7th order heaven grade, right? Luo Fu slowly reacted. The guardian envoys of the Myriad Demons Ridge forces in the inner circle won't be able to sleep peacefully in the future. Yes. Qi Shi nodded, but the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind, so fellow cultivator Lu should be more careful. I'll contact him later. Luo Fu changed the topic. Brother Chenhai of the Fa Hua sect sent a message saying that we will join forces to attack the Cloud Smoke cult in a few days, so junior brother should prepare early. Qi Shi hurriedly nodded. I understand. The Cloud Smoke cult's encampment was next to Silver Light Island. When Lu Yi was here last time, Luo Fu wanted to attack the Cloud Smoke cult's encampment with the help of Ying Jiao. In the end, Lu Yi tried, but Ying Jiao became smarter and failed to lure him out, so the matter was left unsettled. Although he couldn't borrow Ying Jiao's power, Luo Fu didn't give up on his plan to attack the Cloud Smoke cult. He joined forces with the nearby alliance sects to put pressure on the Cloud Smoke cult. In the past, the Cloud Smoke cult could still join forces with the Sky Pillar sect, but now, the Sky Pillar sect was like a grasshopper after autumn. They didn't even have the strength to jump around, so how could they have the time to care about the Cloud Smoke cult? This led to the Cloud Smoke cult being targeted by the 2 Grand Heaven alliances, and the disciples were miserable. In other words, when Lu Yi drove Ying Jiao to attack the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, the Grand Heaven alliance had one less threat, and they could spare more energy to deal with the other enemies. Not to mention the Silver Light Island, the Hidden God Palace and the Overcloud Palace were the same. Originally, they wanted to fight the Windflower Hall and the Sunlight Mountain together, but now, the Windflower Hall and the Sunlight Mountain didn't have the ability to fight against them. Thus, the Hidden God Palace and the Overcloud Palace could do a lot more things. They could go to the Windflower Hall and the Sunlight Mountain from time to time, or they could join forces to fight the other forces in the Demon Mountain. Attacking the encampment didn't only bring them resources and power, but also many other benefits. In short, in this area, the stalemate between the 2 factions was broken, and the situation was revived. Lu Yi opened his eyes and slowly crawled to his feet. He hadn't slept so well for a long time. When he woke up, he felt the tiredness of the past few days was gone, and he felt refreshed. He was meditating next to him. When she saw him wake up, she brought him some water to wash his face and rinse his mouth. Lu Yi washed his face and rinsed his mouth. He picked up the amber on his body and threw it aside. Then he put on his clothes and got off the bed. When he went downstairs, the breakfast was already prepared. It looked very sumptuous, and the food was still hot. Apparently, the Hidden God Palace had put in a lot of effort to prepare it. Lu Yi didn't refuse and sat down to eat. He sat opposite him, looking at him with her hands supporting her face. Lu Yi chewed the food while checking the battlefield mark. When he woke up, there was a lot of information in the battlefield mark. 2 forces in the Demon Mountain had been attacked, and his name was spread in the spiritual stream battlefield again. He had expected this. After all, no matter if it was him sneaking into the Windflower Hall or breaking the formation of the Sunlight Mountain, many people in the Demon Mountain saw him. Those people didn't all die, so they would spread the news. Most of the people who sent him messages were the guardian envoys or deputy envoys of the various large sects who had established themselves in the Chess Sea. Some of them were concerned about him and told him to be careful in the future. This was because the Myriad Demons Ridge now knew that he had a unique technique to break through formations, so they were very wary of him. Some of them also invited him to their encampment as a guest. Obviously, they had other intentions. Chapter 300. Second senior sister Shui Yuan and fourth senior brother Li Ba Xian both sent him messages. Second senior sister told him not to run around for the time being and to stay in Hidden Spirit Palace's station to cultivate, her words full of concern and worry. Fourth senior brother's message had another meaning, telling him to rest assured and act boldly. If anyone dared to break the rules, he would teach them a lesson. There was also a message from Hua Ci. Perhaps it was because she had become the vice envoy of Blue Blood Sect, but this woman was much more serious than before. She didn't say much in her message, only telling Lu Yi about the recent situation in Blue Blood Sect's station and telling him to be at ease when he went out and that she was at home. After reading this message, Lu Yi frowned, inexplicably feeling like a man working hard outside while a woman stayed at home. However, counting the time, Hua Ci was not far from the 8th Order. Once she reached the 8th Order, she would need to enter the inner circle. Once she left, there would be no vice envoy in Blue Blood Sect's station, so Lu Yi didn't know if she had found a replacement. Qin Yu was definitely not a candidate because he had probably reached the 8th Order earlier than she did. There really weren't many people left in the sect who could shoulder the burden. After all, there was a decline in talent. However, Blue Blood Sect had just begun to develop again, so there was no way to solve this problem. As for which sect they would join after reaching the 8th Order, that would be up to them. Lu Yi had already paved the way for them, and there were now several sects they could choose from, so they would definitely be taken care of if they chose one. After replying to all the messages one by one, Lu Yi was busy for a long time. "Why are you laughing so happily?" Lu Yi asked without raising his head. "Nothing," Yi shook her head. Lu Yi sighed. Girls have grown up and have their own little secrets. Why ask when you already know?" Yi made a face at him. What Lu Yi didn't know was that he had always been worried about Lu Ye's growth rate. When they first met, their cultivations weren't high, but at that time, Hoopa was actually stronger than Lu Yi. However, as time passed, Lu Yi not only surpassed Hoopa, but the gap between them grew bigger and bigger. This was especially true after Lu Yi left Azure Cloud Mountain and headed for the Blue Blood Sect's encampment. In the beginning, she and Hoopa were able to provide some assistance in the battle, but as Lu Ye's cultivation base increased, the enemies she encountered also became stronger and stronger. She and Hoopa's usefulness became extremely limited. At most, Hoopa could serve as a mount, and at most, she could help Lu Yi scout the surroundings. At that time, she understood that one day, the gap between them would be so big that she would not be able to see Lu Ye's back. At that time, no matter how unwilling she would have to separate from Lu Yi. This was something she didn't want to accept, nor did she want to think about. Affected by her mood, Hoopa continuously swallowed spirit pills to strengthen himself as long as he could bear it. However, he still couldn't keep up with the speed at which Lu Yi was becoming stronger. It wasn't until he returned to Blue Blood Sect that the situation improved slightly. She began to study arts with the headmaster, and could now cultivate on her own. Because of that, her and Hoopa's growth speed increased greatly, because they were both becoming stronger and helping each other. It could be said that when other people cultivated, they were exerting their strength alone, but Hoopa and Yi's cultivation was a spirit and a tiger exerting their strength at the same time. Double the cultivation, double the happiness. In Immortal Essence City, Hoopa's innate ability to transform into a nightmare spirit was of great help. In the soul cleansing pond, he was cleansed by the soul cleansing water, and her entire person underwent an earth-shattering change. Moreover, she could feel that this change didn't erupt immediately. As her strength grew in the future, it would continue to have an effect. When Lu Yi broke the great formation of Mount Shrouded Sun, she and Hu Po were of great help. Hu Po's tiger roar and her large-scale magic art created an opportunity for Lu Yi to snatch the great formation Jade Slit Ring, which also allowed giant armor and the others to rush over in time. It was only at that time that she was finally able to barely keep up with Lu Ye's cultivation pace. She didn't dare to say what would happen in the future, but at least for a short period of time, she didn't have to worry about being left behind by Lu Yi. Therefore, after returning from Mount Shrouded Sun, Yi had been in a good mood. Oh right, this was sent by Shin'in Palace this morning. Yi took out a storage pouch and handed it to Lu Yi. What are these? Spiritual stones and Dan beads. After conquering the bases of the two great sects in the Demon's Ridge, Lu Yi got not only the support from the Tianji Pillar, but also a lot of medicinal materials and other miscellaneous things, including the storage pouches of the cultivators. Shenyin Palace must have thought that Lu Yi couldn't carry too many things, so they converted them into spiritual stones and Dan beads. These two things were the hard currency of cultivation. Nobody would complain about having too much. Take it. Lu Yi looked around and said suspiciously, "Where is giant armor? Seems to be cultivating. How is his injury?" It's not a big deal. Lu Yi nodded. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he left his place and went to the cultivation room of Shenyin Palace to cultivate and read. He had planned to continue his journey after conquering the bases of Windflower Yard and Mount Shrouded Sunday. However, according to the current situation, he had to stay away for a while and let the Demon's Ridge calm down. Although Second Sister Apprentice was a bit too worried, it was not a good time for him to show up in public, so as not to irritate the Demon's Ridge. After this, Lu Yi could almost imagine that his image would be spread all over the bases of the great sects in the Demon's Ridge. It was not difficult to copy images. There was a kind of spiritual tattoo that had this function, which was called image preservation. Correspondingly, there was also a kind of spiritual tattoo called sound preservation. The former could record images, while the latter could record sounds. If the two of them worked together, there would be some wonderful effects. For example, Lu Yi had previously found a lifelike picture book in Manager Yang's storage bag. After injecting spirit energy into the picture book, not only did the characters in the picture seem to come to life, they also made some difficult and unimaginable movements and made all kinds of strange sounds. There were image preservation and sound preservation spirit tattoos on the album. However, Lu Yi did not know the value of the album. Now, it seemed that the album was very valuable. Unfortunately, it was taken away by the sect master. Moreover, it was very likely that the album was not what he thought. The sect master told him that it was a dual cultivation technique. At that time, he thought that the sect master was just talking nonsense. Now, it seemed that it might be true. In the past, he was just a member of the spirit stream realm. Even if he had some outstanding performances, he was not worthy of too much attention. But now it was different. The two bases of the Demon's Ridge had been destroyed. Lu Yi of the Jade Blood sect would definitely become the person that all the sects of the Demon's Ridge would guard. Once they found out that he appeared in their bases, it would inevitably cause some panic and misunderstanding. Lu Yi also wanted to go to the Tianji treasure house to buy a treasure that could change his appearance. This thing was expensive, but it could be bought in the Tianji treasure house. After using it, it could change one's appearance. However, it was meaningless to just change one's appearance. Hupo was there, not to mention that there was giant armor, which was too obvious. Unless Lu Yi acted alone in the future, he might be recognized by the people of the Demon's Ridge wherever he went. This made him more or less worried. The original plan to take revenge in the inner circle had just started. Was it going to fail? He was more or less unwilling, but he could only comfort himself that the situation was not as bad as he thought. Because whether it was the Windflower Yard or the Sunlight Mountain, there was some element of luck. As long as the Demon's Ridge took precautions, this kind of thing would not happen again. The cultivators of the Demon's Ridge were not fools. Presumably, when they figured out the whole situation, They should be able to see this point clearly. While Lu Yi was cultivating and reading in the training room of the Shenin Palace, the main hall of the Shenin Palace was bustling with noise and excitement. There were guests constantly visiting, and all of them were the guardian or deputy guardian of the nearby forces of the Haoyan Alliance. In less than a day, there were 7 or 8 people gathered here. Obviously, they had all heard the news. Gu Kanyang and Wei Li accompanied them personally and explained earnestly. They were not as high-spirited as they were when they attacked the 2 major forces of the Demon's Ridge. When Lu Yi came back last night, he told them about this matter. He said that there should be people coming to the Shenin Palace to ask for his help. He wanted Gu Kanyang and Wei Li to explain for him. It was not that Lu Yi could predict the future. It was mainly because he had the experience of the Silver Light Island. After the Silver Light Island borrowed the power of Yingjiao to break the Sky Pillar Sex Station, the nearby forces of the Haoyan Alliance had the idea of attacking Yingjiao. If Yingjiao had not become smarter, the forces of the Demon's Ridge would have been unlucky. Therefore, after the news of Lu Yi being able to break the protective formation spread, it was inevitable that someone would come to ask for his help. The reason why he did not show up was that it was useless for him to show up. Therefore, he threw this hot potato to the Shenin Palace. Everyone! Gu Kanyang stood up and gestured in the air, suppressing the noise in the surroundings. I know why you are here and I understand your feelings. However, you should know that it is not the Shenin Palace that wants to freeze Brother Yi. It is Brother Yi who told us before that the attack of the Windflower Yard and the Sunlight Mountain was largely due to luck. There is no way it can happen again. Brother Gu, what you said is meaningless. The Shenin Palace and the Overcloud Palace are eating meat with Brother Yi. We brothers do not ask for much, but it is not too much to ask for some soup, right? Since Brother Yi has the means to break the formations of those 2 sects, he can naturally break other formations. There are some things in this world that are only different from countless times. That's right, Brother Gu. We have known each other for a long time. I have nothing to say to you. If you don't ask Brother Yi to come out today, I will expose your secret. The corner of Gu Kanyang's eyes twitched. He did not know what the other party had on him. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Brother Nyo, you can't do that. Then ask Brother Yi to come out. Ask Brother Yi to come out. A group of guardian envoys and deputy envoys in the main hall shouted. There were also those who had just rushed over and did not know the situation. They also joined in the shouting, causing Gu Kanyang and Wei Li to have a headache. Chapter 301. There had never been a spirit stream realm cultivator who was so sought after. It could be said that after the Windflower Courtyard and Sunlight Mountains encampments were destroyed, Lu Yi had instantly become a delicious cake in the eyes of all the great sects. It was unprecedented for an 8th order spirit stream realm cultivator to achieve such a level. Who didn't want to break the array of their neighbors' encampment, and then press their neighbors who had been at odds with each other for countless years to the ground and beat them? It was a pity that he didn't have the means to break the formation before. Now there was. Naturally, all the sects and clans of the Haoyan Alliance were scrambling for it. Gu Kanyang raised his hand again and pressed down. Everyone, calm down and listen to me. Drawing everyone's attention, Gu Shenyang said, everyone has come from afar. If I don't give everyone a proper explanation today, it won't be right. I didn't lie when I said that it was because of luck that we were able to take over the Windflower Yard and the Sunlight Mountain. It is true. You guys don't know that Yueme was able to take over the Windflower Yard. She didn't think that someone could sneak into the Windflower Yard without being noticed. Following Gu Kanyang's explanation, everyone's emotions slowly calmed down. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Wei Li hurriedly got someone to serve tea. After that, Gu Kanyang started to talk about the situation of attacking the Sunlight Mountain. After a while, Gu Shenyang said, Brother Yi used different methods to attack and occupy these 2 bases, but it's true that he can't use them anymore. Everyone here is a sensible person, so I'm sure you understand this. The guardian envoys and deputy envoys who had been making a ruckus earlier all sank into deep thought. If things were really as Gu Kanyang said, then there was no way to repeat it. The loss of the Windflower Courtyard's encampment was due to Yume's carelessness. It couldn't be said that she was careless. If this happened to anyone, they wouldn't be able to guard against it. In the past, no one had ever been able to sneak into an enemy sex formation. Even if they did, they might not have the chance to seize the jade slit ring when facing a guardian like Yume. Lu Yi did it. Not only did he sever one of Yume's arms, but he also seized the opportunity to seize the Great Formation Jade Pendant. This allowed the people from Shenyin Palace and Lingyun Palace to break through the Great Defensive Formation and invade the encampment. Not to mention Mount Sunlight. After Yume sent out the message, Mount Sunlight had been guarding against Lu Yi. Lu Yi had no chance to sneak in, so he had to change the way he was going to break the formation. The reason why they succeeded in the end was that there weren't a lot of cultivators left in Saint Sunlight Mountain. There were only over 100 of them. Lu Yi led 10 body cultivators to attack them and beat them up. If there were dozens more cultivators guarding the mountain, things would be different. Even if Lu Yi could lead Zhu Jia and the others into the mountain, they would be besieged to death. The information was not confidential. The Demon's Mountain must have known it through the Windflower Yard and the Saint Sunlight Mountain. Therefore, as long as they set up some warning formations in the base or put more cultivators in the base, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to do anything to them anymore. The hall was silent for a long time. After a long while, the guardian surnamed Nyo said, "So we came here for nothing?" Gu Shenyang said, "Brother Ye said that when his cultivation and attainments in the art of formations are higher in the future, he might be able to accomplish something. However, there's nothing he can do now." Although everyone was slightly disappointed, they knew that Gu Kanyang was telling the truth. Lu Ye's plan was amazing, but it was easy to guard against it. As long as there were enough people in the base, it would be useless even if he had a unique method to break the formation. "That's a good thing," a thin cultivator suddenly said. "What do you mean, Brother Zhao?" Cultivator Zhao said, "Cultivator Ye's plan should be feared by the Demon's Mountain. If he wants to go to the spiritual stream battlefield in the future, he will be targeted. However, now that his plan can be easily guarded against, his threat to the Demon's Mountain will be greatly reduced. In this way, Cultivator Ye's situation will be safer." When everyone heard him, they all felt that he was right. If there was no way to guard against Lu Ye's methods, then the Myriad Devil Ridge would definitely become restless. If things went wrong, then it might be like last time, where they would act recklessly without regard for the rules. If the experts on the Spirit Stream list from the core circle were attracted, then Lu Yi would definitely not be able to resist them. Now it was different. The Demon's Mountain would be afraid, but they wouldn't be so unscrupulous. "Your Hidden God Palace and Cloud Over Palace are really lucky." Someone sighed. They only regretted that Lu Ye didn't go to their base as a guest. If he did, the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Over Palace wouldn't have taken advantage of him. "You let me win, you let me win." Gu Kenyang laughed. Thinking about it carefully, the Hidden God Palace was really lucky. If it wasn't for Lu Yi, He Ji Yen, and the others would have died in Celestial Origin City. Since they couldn't break the formation again, there was no point for them to stay any longer. Thus they all left. Gu Kanyang and Wei Li warmly sent them off. Gu Kanyang only heaved a sigh of relief when all the guardian and deputy guardians had left. He returned to the main hall and sat opposite Wei Li to discuss the follow-up matters. The Windflower Yard and Sunlight Mountain's bases were broken. The former still had about 300 cultivators alive, while the latter only had about 200 cultivators left. Moreover, they definitely had to rebuild their bases. There was no way the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Over Palace would agree to such a thing. It was impossible to completely eradicate these two enemy forces, but they could continue to suppress them and prevent them from recovering so quickly. As long as the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud Over Palace worked together to suppress these two forces, it would be very difficult for them to make a comeback. In this way, the Hidden God Palace and Cloud Over Palace could develop themselves as they wished. They could even spare some people to cooperate with the nearby Grand Sky Alliance to attack more Demon's Mountain forces. However, they still had to adapt to the situation and couldn't make a hasty conclusion. While they were discussing, Gu Kanyang suddenly felt something. He checked his battlefield imprint and sent a message out. "Zhao Li is back." Gu Kanyang looked at Wei Li. Is he still not giving up? The Zhao Li he mentioned was one of the guardians who had left not long ago. It was unknown why he had returned. Wei Li thought for a while and said, Brother Zhao is a meticulous person. We've said what we needed to say. I don't think he'll make things difficult for us. Then why did he come back? Senior apprentice brother, don't forget how Brother Zhao's Tian Yen sect gained its foothold in the 9 regions. Gu Kenyang thought for a while and suddenly realized, I see. This guy is so cunning. He didn't say anything when there were so many people, but now he sneaked back. I'm afraid he wants to take all the benefits for himself. Wei Li laughed, not necessarily. However, if Brother Zhao asks, Brother Yi might not refuse. He stopped talking because he had already sensed Zhao Li's aura. Brother Gu, Brother Wei. Zhao Li stepped in. Gu Kenyang pretended to ask, Brother Zhao, did you leave something behind? Zhao Li smiled and said, That's not it. It's just that I forgot to tell Brother Gu about something. I only remembered it halfway. His expression turned serious and he said, Previously I said that Brother Yi's situation would be relatively safer after the Myriad Demon Ridge figured out the whole story. However, after thinking about it carefully, that's only one possibility. Then, there's another possibility? There's another possibility. Naturally, the Myriad Demon Ridge will do their best to deal with Brother Yi, regardless of the rules and face. Zhao Li's expression was solemn. Brother Yi is only an 8th order cultivator now, but he already has such means. Although it's easy to guard against him now, when his cultivation increases in the future and his attainments in the Tao of Arrays become deeper, it will be difficult to guard against him. The Myriad Demon Ridge may not be willing to take precautions. If that's the case, not only will Brother Yi's situation be worrying, but even the Hidden God Palace will be in a bad situation. Gu Kenyang was startled when he heard this. How did they end up talking about the Hidden God Palace? It's not a secret that Brother Yi is in the Hidden God Palace's encampment. The Myriad Demon Ridge must be aware of this. If they want to kill Brother Yi, they will definitely mobilize troops in the next few days and gather manpower from the nearby Myriad Demon Ridge encampments to attack the Hidden God Palace's encampment. Gu Kenyang's expression gradually turned serious. How likely do you think this is, Brother Zhao? Zhao Li slowly shook his head. I can't say for sure. This is just my own speculation. Therefore, I think we shouldn't return to the encampment for the time being. We should observe here for a while. This way, if the Myriad Demon Ridge really makes a big move, the Sky Expanse sect can come to our aid in time. Of course, if the Myriad Demon Ridge doesn't make a move, it will prove that I'm wrong. It would be best if it's just a false alarm. Thank you, Brother Zhao. It's my duty. However, I think what Brother Gu should do now is to inform the High Cloud Palace and the nearby Union sects as soon as possible to prepare for reinforcements. After all, they are closer. That makes sense. Gu Kenyang nodded seriously. Then I'll have to trouble you. Zhao Li cupped his fists. Junior Brother Wei, bring Brother Zhao to rest. Gu Kenyang turned to look at Wei Li. Wei Li nodded and led Zhao Li to the area where the guests were staying. After a while, Wei Li returned and saw Gu Kenyang sitting on the chair, deep in thought. Wei Li walked to the side and poured himself a cup of tea. He took a sip and said, Senior brother, what are you thinking about? I'm thinking that Zhao Li has been going around in circles and almost got me involved. Wei Li looked at him in confusion. Gu Kenyang smiled slightly. If I'm not mistaken, did he take the initiative to ask to be Brother Yi's neighbor? The area where the guests were staying was not small. They were all individual lofts. Currently, only Lu Yi and Giant Armor were staying there. It was up to Wei Li to settle them down. However, if the guests took the initiative to ask, Wei Li would not refuse. Yes, Wei Li replied. Brother Zhao asked for Brother Yi's residence on the way and chose the neighboring loft. Gu Kenyang bared his teeth, as I thought. Senior brother, you mean, can't you see? This guy came back to poach Yi. Wei Li wasn't an idiot. It was just that he was busy with trivial matters today and was a little confused. He didn't think too much at the moment. Now that he was reminded by Gu Shenyang, he immediately came to a realization. In that case, Senior Brother Zhao was exaggerating just now? Chapter 302. That's not entirely the case. Gu Shenyang crossed his hands on his lap, deep in thought. I wouldn't have thought of it if he hadn't mentioned it. But now, our sect really needs to be on guard. I've already sent a message to the nearby alliance sections. There's nothing wrong with being careful. However, the Myriad Devil Ridge probably won't attack our sect. Let's not talk about whether they can break into our sect's encampment. Even if they can, so what? Can't they run if they can't win? So, it's impossible for the Myriad Devil Ridge to attack Brother Ye by taking over our sect's encampment. Wei Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then, Brother Zhao also said that if there's a situation, they can send reinforcements in time. I wouldn't have thought of it if he hadn't mentioned it. Now that he mentioned it, I realized something was wrong. The Tianyan sect isn't close to here. How can they send reinforcements? He came here so quickly because he happened to have something to do nearby. If we wait for their reinforcements, it'll be too late. This Brother Zhao, if you have something to say, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush? So, he's here to poach people. He doesn't know if Brother Ye is affiliated with our sect, so it's inappropriate for him to speak rashly. If he has a good relationship with Brother Ye in private, then the situation will be different. I think Brother Ye won't be able to refuse his invitation. This guy. Wei Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I've long heard that the Tianyan sect's Zhao Li is cunning. Now, it seems that he lives up to his reputation. Senior brother, should we? There's no need. Gu Shenyang waved his hand. Brother Ye didn't mention anything about cultivating in our sect. He's probably just passing by. Moreover, our sect owes him a lot of favors. If Zhao Li can really invite him away, that's his ability. Let's not talk about this for now. We still have to take precautions. Send more people out to monitor the situation. If the Myriad Devil Ridge really attacks, we'll have to deal with it early. Yes. Giant Armor recently found a good place to cultivate, which was the cultivation room in the Shenin Palace. In the past, when he followed Sima Yang, he had almost never entered other people's residences. He had never experienced the feeling of cultivating under such a high concentration of heaven and earth spirit qi. Ever since Lu Yi took him there once, he was extremely obsessed with that place. Other than coming back every night to have a good meal, he was almost never seen. Zhu Jia was someone who could control his temper. In this aspect, even Lu Yi could not compare. Thinking about it, it wasn't strange. If he couldn't control his temper, he wouldn't have been able to follow Sima Yang for so long. Sima Yang's level of exploitation was something that no one could stand. However, because he was grateful to Sima Yang for leading him on the path of cultivation, no matter how Sima Yang treated him, Giant Armor never complained. The Windflower Courtyard's cultivators who killed Sima Yang had already died in the Immortal Essence City. Even the Windflower Courtyard's encampment had been captured by Lu Yi. Now that Sima Yang's enmity had been avenged, he should be able to rest in peace in the underworld. Within the pavilion, Lu Yi and Zhao Li sat opposite each other, and they spoke with fervor and assurance. What they discussed was all related to the Formation Dao. A few days ago, the two inadvertently met by chance, and then slowly became familiar with each other. However, because Lu Yi spent most of his time in the training room, they didn't speak much. Until today, when he accidentally learned that Zhao Li was actually cultivating the Formation Dao, Lu Yi suddenly became interested and pulled him to discuss it together. What he learned from Madame Yun was basically the Dao of spirit tattoos. His contact with the Formation Dao was mainly based on the books he brought out from Madame Yun. It could be said that he was a self-taught genius. Of course, the main reason was that the Formation Dao was a branch of the Dao of spirit tattoos. Although he had some insights now, Lu Yi didn't know how high his attainments in the Formation Dao were. After all, there was no comparison. The more he chatted with Zhao Li, the more congenial he became. He didn't see the cold sweat gradually forming on Zhao Li's forehead. At this moment, Zhao Li was wailing in his heart. Lu Yi could use some special techniques to sneak in or break other people's protective arrays, which meant that he already had some attainments in the Formation Dao. But after this discussion, Zhao Li discovered that Lu Ye's talent in the Formation Dao was very high, but it was a little strange. There were two directions in the Formation Dao. One was to set up arrays, and the other was to break arrays. These two directions generally complemented each other. Those who knew how to set up arrays would definitely break arrays, and vice versa. But Zhao Li discovered that Lu Ye's cultivation in the formation Dao was a little biased. Simply put, Lu Ye's performance in breaking arrays was impeccable, but in terms of setting up arrays, he seemed a little inexperienced. The two of them naturally didn't just talk. They would also set up their own arrays and let the other party break them. The current situation was that no matter what array Zhao Li set up, Lu Yi could break it in 2 or 3 breaths. Although Zhao Li's attainments in the formation Dao weren't high, and the array he set up wasn't very exquisite, it shouldn't have been broken so quickly. This gave Zhao Li a big blow, and he felt that all his years of study had been in vain. Fortunately, the array Lu Yi set up wasn't very good, and Zhao Li could break it with a little effort. This gave him some confidence. The array Lu Yi set up wasn't very good, but the process of setting it up shocked Zhao Li. This was because he directly urged his spiritual power to set up an array in an extremely short amount of time. He didn't need to use any tools to set it up. He had only seen this kind of method from the great elder of his sect. But what was the great elder's cultivation? And what was Lu Ye's cultivation? For spirit stream realm cultivators like them, if they wanted to set up an array, they would need to use some tools. The most commonly used tools were small array flags or array bases. Each array flag and array base had different characteristics. With the help of these array flags and array bases, they would need to spend some time and energy to set up an array. So now, Zhao Li wanted to understand one thing. Brother Ye, who did you learn about the formation Dao from? Lu Yi thought of Madame Yun. Although Madame Yun taught him about the Dao of Spirit Runes, the formation Dao was a branch of the Dao of Spirit Runes. It wasn't wrong to say that Madame Yun taught him. But Madame Yun had warned him before that he couldn't mention her to anyone. The Jade Blood sect has some ancient books about the formation Dao. Brother Zhao should have heard that I once obtained the inheritance of a Spirit Rune Master. Spirit Rune Masters are more or less related to the formation Dao. So when I have nothing to do, I look through these ancient books. Brother Ye, you're a self-taught genius? The corner of Zhao Li's eyes twitched. Without anyone to teach him, he could achieve such an achievement by himself. What if he had a good teacher? He didn't dare to imagine it. In the past, he always heard the elders in the sect say that there were always some peerless geniuses in this world that ordinary people couldn't compare to. He didn't take it seriously. In his opinion, even if those so-called peerless geniuses were stronger than him, they couldn't be that much stronger. Zhao Li was also a genius. But now, it seemed that he was arrogant and ignorant. However, he finally understood why Lu Ye's performance in the formation Dao was so strange. He could easily break the array, but the array he set up was so clumsy. And the way he set it up was so shocking. What shocked Zhao Li even more was that Lu Ye, a self-taught genius, had actually used some special array breaking techniques to break the other party's defensive array. Brother Ye, have you heard of the 100 Formation Pagoda? What's that? Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. Although he hadn't heard of it, he knew that it had something to do with arrays just from the name. It can be considered a treasure from the previous era, Lin Feng said. The so-called previous era was the era before the Spirit Stream battlefield appeared. Lu Yi had some understanding of the 9 states, so he naturally knew about the era. He originally thought that a world like the 9 states, where there were many cultivation sects and countless powerful cultivators, should have a very ancient history. But in reality, that was not the case. The situation was slightly more complicated than he thought. Simply put, there were no ancient records of what the 9 states looked like before the Spirit Stream battlefield appeared. All the ancient records that recorded history only described what happened after the Spirit Stream battlefield appeared. The Spirit Stream battlefield should have appeared about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Since then, the 9 states had 2 major factions, the Haotian Alliance and the Myriad Demons Ridge. However, one thing was certain. Before the Spirit Stream battlefield appeared, the 9 states should have been an extremely prosperous cultivation world. This was because there were many things in the 9 states that clearly did not belong to this era. For example, some ancient relics and ancient inheritances would often appear in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Unfortunately, because there were no records of this, they referred to the time before the Spirit Stream battlefield as the previous era. The various records available could only be found about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. This was completely unreasonable. For the speed at which cultivators changed, 2,000 or 3,000 years was not a long time. If there were no accidents, the lifespan of Spirit Ocean Realm cultivators would be around 1,000 years. True Lake Realm cultivators would be around 500 years. Cloud River Realm cultivators would be around 200 years. As for Spirit Stream Realm cultivators, this level of cultivators was like chives that would pop up again and again. Of course, these numbers were only theoretical. Cultivators often fought fiercely with others. If they suffered an internal injury, it would definitely affect their lifespan. So now, the cultivation world of the 9 states generally believed that some earth-shattering event had happened in the cultivation world of the previous era. This event was enough to sweep the entire 9 states. Otherwise, it would not make sense that the records of the 9 states only went back 2,000 or 3,000 years. The 100 Formation Pagoda that Zhao Li spoke of should be a remnant of the previous era. The 100 Formation Pagoda has a total of 100 floors. Every floor has a different array, and each floor is more difficult than the last. Every time you pass a floor, you will receive a reward from Tianji. Those rewards are all related to array Dao. There is a saying among array cultivators: those who have not passed the 100 Formation Pagoda cannot be considered a true array cultivator. According to our current classification of array Dao, those who can pass the first 10 floors can be considered to have entered the door of array Dao and can barely be considered a qualified array cultivator. Those who pass the 20th floor can be considered proficient in array Dao. Those who pass the 33rd floor can be called a grandmaster. Those who pass the 66th floor can be called a grandmaster in array Dao. Then what if you pass the 100th floor? No one has tried it yet. When Zhao Li said this, there was a faint trace of regret in his eyes. Because the 100 Formation Pagoda is not complete. There are only 66 floors. Chapter 303. Not only was the 100 Formation Pagoda incomplete, but it was also divided into 3 parts. One part was in the Celestial Expanse sect's main sect, which was the 9 states, and the other part was in the Cloudy River battlefield. The Cloudy River battlefield was a place that only cultivators in the Cloudy River realm could enter. However, the situation there was very different from the Spirit Stream battlefield. The various sects had no encampments there. As for the last part, its whereabouts were unknown. This was also a pain in the hearts of all the formation cultivators in the 9 states. Because the benefits of the 100 Formation Pagoda were too great, the top formation cultivators in the 9 states had all benefited from the 100 Formation Pagoda. No one knew why this thing was divided into 3 parts. Some people once speculated that it was broken by an extremely strong cultivator with great power. But now, even the strongest cultivator in the 9 states at the Divine Ocean Realm dared not say that he could destroy the 100 Formation Pagoda. That thing could almost be regarded as a strange treasure, a treasure that surpassed the level of spirit treasure. Brother Yi, if you want to cultivate Formation Dao, I suggest that you go to the main sect and challenge the 100 Formation Pagoda. It will definitely be very beneficial for you. Just as Gu Kanyang had thought, Zhao Li had returned because he wanted to poach Lu Yi. He did not believe that with the Celestial Expanse sect's foundation in Formation Dao, Lu Yi would not be moved. However, after talking with Lu Yi, he indeed felt that Lu Yi should make a trip to the 100 Formation Pagoda. The 100 Formation Pagoda was extremely strange. The higher one's talent in Formation Dao, the greater the benefits one could obtain inside. Of course, as long as Lu Yi was willing to go to the 100 Formation Pagoda, his goal would be achieved. In fact, Lu Yi could not resist such a temptation. Through his previous actions in the Windflower Courtyard and Sunlight Mountain, he had already realized his shortcomings. Based on the current situation, his attainment in Formation Dao was still not enough. Using his special technique to sneak into the enemy's defensive formation would not be considered in the future. With the Windflower Courtyard as an example, the various Myriad Demons' Ridge encampments would definitely guard against this, not giving him any chance to take advantage of it. There were many drawbacks to opening a hole in someone else's array. Last time, a large part of the reason they were able to open it was due to luck. Moreover, the hole would be repaired very quickly. There was no way for too many people to rush in at once. Otherwise, Lu Yi would not have brought only 10 body cultivators with him. If he wanted to break the formation better, there were only 2 ways. One was to increase his cultivation as soon as possible. He had the Insight Spirit inscriptions, which was an advantage that all formation cultivators rarely had. With the help of the Insight Spirit inscriptions, he could easily find the flaws of the formation. As long as his cultivation was high enough, he could break any formation with 1 slash. There was no need to waste any effort at all. There was nothing in this world that couldn't be broken by absolute strength. If 1 slash wasn't enough, then 2 slashes would be enough. Of course, it was still too early to think about this. He had tried before, but his strength was not enough. Therefore, if he wanted to break the array, he could only improve his attainments in Array Dao. Now, he could only rely on himself to learn. Although his progress was not slow, he was still far from achieving his goal. Even if he returned to the Jade Blood Sect to consult Madame Yun, he might not be able to achieve what he wanted. Madame Yun was an extremely outstanding spirit rune master, but a person's energy was limited. Her attainments in Array Dao might not be very high. If the 100 Formation Pagoda was as incredible as Zhao Li said, then he would definitely give it a try. Lu Yi took out his 10-point map and checked the location of the Sky Expanse Sect's encampment. He found that there was still a distance from here. Even if he flew, it would take a few days. Brother Zhao, thank you very much for your kind invitation. However, I still have some matters to attend to. Why don't you return to the encampment first? I'll disturb you after I'm done with my matters. Zhao Li was overjoyed. He stood up and said, "That's great. Then I'll return and wait for your news." Lu Yi personally sent him out. Soon, Zhao Li found Wei Li, who was on duty, and left. Since he had achieved his goal, there was no need for him to stay any longer. In the pavilion, Yi flashed out and asked in confusion, "Lu Yi, what else do we have to attend to?" She didn't see Lu Yi having any urgent matters these days. "Nothing." Lu Yi shook his head. "Then why did you say that to him?" "Oh, I understand. It's not good for you to reject him, so that was an excuse." "That's not it." Lu Yi smiled. "It's just that I've been in the limelight before. I'm afraid that we'll encounter some trouble when we leave this place. If Brother Zhao comes along, he'll definitely be involved. It's better to let him go first." "I see. You've thought too much." Yi understood. "Then we'll really encounter trouble when we leave this place?" "Who knows?" He couldn't be sure about this. He could only say that it was better to nip the problem in the bud. A few days later, Lu Yi found Gu Shenyang and bid him farewell. Gu Shenyang tried to persuade him to stay, but seeing that Lu Yi had made up his mind, he didn't say anything else. Although he felt that it was a pity, he could tell long ago that Lu Yi was just passing by and wasn't here to cultivate. In fact, he was a little envious of Lu Yi, who didn't stay in one place and traveled everywhere. Although he would encounter more dangers, his knowledge and experience would also increase. However, envy was envy, and he really couldn't do it. After watching Lu Yi leave with giant armor, Gu Shenyang returned to the station. Lu Yi sat cross-legged on the spirit artifact in the air, with giant armor in front of him. This flight-type spirit artifact wasn't the small boat he had obtained from Yuanguang. He had tried it before, but with his 8th order cultivation, it was still a little difficult for him to fly this flight-type spirit artifact. The main reason was that he didn't have enough spirit qi to sustain it, so Lu Yi had always been riding on Hupo. This way, not only could he save spirit qi, but he could also cultivate. This spirit artifact belonged to giant armor. Lu Yi had given giant armor a lot of spirit artifacts in order to accumulate enough merit points for him, including quite a few flight spirit artifacts. Giant armor chose one of them and kept it. This showed the benefits of traveling with giant armor. With him controlling the flight artifact, it could save a lot of time. If he rode Hupo to Heaven Expanse Sect Station, it would take at least half a month. With giant armor's flight artifact, it was different. He could reach in 3 or 4 days. Moreover, because giant armor had something similar to a monster core in his body, it stored a lot of spirit chi. So, if necessary, giant armor could continue flying without stopping at all. However, considering that this would put a lot of burden on giant armor, and it would consume a lot of his strength, it was better to rest for a while after flying for half a day. While Lu Yi and giant armor were flying away, in a hidden place 5 kilometers away from Divine Hidden Palace's station, a pair of eyes used their eyesight to observe. After recognizing Lu Ye's identity, they immediately sent out a message. After the message was confirmed by the receiver, it continued to spread. One person spread to 10, and 10 to 100. Soon, many people knew that Lu Yi of Blue Blood Sect had left Divine Hidden Palace's station, and his whereabouts were unknown. Zhao Li's previous worries were right. After Windflower Courtyard and Sunlight Mountain stations were broken, although the forces of Myriad Demon Ridge had figured out the details, they still didn't dare to let Lu Yi continue to grow. 8 or 9 months ago, Lu Yi was just a 5th-order cultivator, but now he was already an 8th-order cultivator. This speed of growth was a bit too fast. If they ignored him now, it would be even more difficult to deal with him when his cultivation gradually increased. Compared to the growth of his cultivation, Myriad Demon Ridge was more worried about his improvement in the array Dao. Right now, Lu Yi had a special technique to break arrays. Who knew how far he would grow in the array Dao in the future? If they let him continue like this, even if the people of Myriad Demon Ridge hid in their station in the future, they wouldn't feel safe. Therefore, these days, the forces of Myriad Demon Ridge had already reached a consensus to eliminate Lu Yi of Blue Blood Sect as soon as possible to prevent future troubles. For this reason, Lu Ye's image had already been distributed so that the relevant personnel would remember his appearance. The entire Myriad Demons Ridge was quietly working together. This time, they didn't plan to make too much of a commotion. The Battle of Golden Light Peak was a lesson learned. Therefore, when Lu Yi stayed in Divine Hidden Palace, Myriad Demon Ridge didn't take action. Because attacking Divine Hidden Palace was meaningless, and they couldn't be sure that they could kill Lu Yi. Even if they captured Divine Hidden Palace's station, Lu Yi could use Divine Hidden Palace's Heaven's Fate Pillar to return to the 9 states to hide. If they wanted to kill him, the wilderness was the best opportunity. The spies scattered everywhere played a role. Every once in a while, a cultivator of Myriad Demon Ridge would report Lu Ye's movements. Because there were too many people deployed this time and they were scattered in various positions, no matter where Lu Yi went, it was difficult to escape the surveillance of Myriad Demon Ridge. It didn't matter if they lost track of him for a short period of time. Soon, someone would see them flying on flying artifacts again. However, what made Myriad Demon Ridge a little speechless was that Lu Ye's movements were irregular. He went east, then west, and occasionally circled a few times. Obviously, he was guarding against being tracked, but it was meaningless. This time, almost all the forces of Myriad Demon Ridge in the inner circle had reached a consensus. As long as he showed up, his whereabouts would be exposed. No matter how he circled around, it was meaningless. On Giant Armor's flying spirit artifact, Lu Ye's eyes were slightly lowered. Although he didn't know the deployment of Myriad Demon Ridge, he had a faint feeling that he was being watched since he left Divine Hidden Palace's station. That was why he had Giant Armor keep changing directions, but now it seemed that it was useless. In the past, he wouldn't have been able to detect this, but this was the advantage of having a powerful soul. He could vaguely sense some abnormalities. There were only 2 possibilities for not being able to escape the enemy's surveillance. One was that someone had been following him, and the other was that there were many people monitoring his movements. It seemed that the situation was more complicated than expected. Checking his spirit apertures, Yang Kai found that he had opened 165, only 15 to reach the 9th Order's 180. If he had a good enough cultivation environment, Lu Yi would be able to open 15 apertures in less than a month. At that time, he would be able to follow the guidance of the great sun-colored glass secret art that he had spent more than 5,000 merit points to open the rest of his spirit apertures. He was looking forward to this heaven-grade secret art. Chapter 304. Lu Ye's original plan was to wait until he broke through to the Ninth Order before leaving the hidden Spirit Palace station, taking advantage of this opportunity to lie low. But the temptation of the 100 Formation Tower mentioned by Zhao Li was too great for him to hold back. Now that there were enemies spying on him in the dark, Lu Yi was not afraid. As long as Myriad Demon Ridge acted within the rules, there was nothing they could do to him. What he was afraid of was that Myriad Demon Ridge would act out of desperation. It wasn't until evening that the feeling of being spied on disappeared. No matter how careful Myriad Demon Ridge's arrangements were, it was impossible for someone to keep an eye on him all the time. There was bound to be a time when they lost track of him. Lu Yi ordered the giant armor to descend and fly into a forest. Starting a bonfire, Giant Armor took out several pieces of beast meat from his storage bag, first giving one to Hu Pe, then grilling the rest over the fire. He did this with great familiarity, obviously having done this many times when he was with Sima Yang. Soon, the hot oil sizzled and the fragrance of the meat filled the air. Giant Armor took out some seasoning and salt from who knows where and sprinkled it on the meat. The aroma became even stronger. Before the beast meat was completely cooked, Giant Armor began to eat heartily, but before that, he also gave Lu Yi a piece. Lu Yi didn't mind, and ate happily with him. This way of eating meat undoubtedly won Giant Armor's favor, and he had become much closer to Lu Yi these days. Lu Yi found a problem, and that was, the few people in his camp, except for Yi, seemed to be gluttons. Needless to say, he and Hu Po were complete pill eaters, consuming 40 to 50 spirit pills a day at this stage. Giant Armor didn't use spirit pills much before because Sima Yang didn't give them to him. His current cultivation was all due to meditation and breathing in world energy. Now that he was following Lu Yi naturally wouldn't be as stingy as Sima Yang. As long as there were enough spirit pills, Giant Armor would consume them freely. However, he didn't consume too many spirit pills because consuming too many spirit pills would affect the purity of his spirit chi. After a full meal, the 2 people and 1 tiger were satisfied. Lu Yi took out the scale armor again and absorbed the blood from it first, then gave 1 each to Hu Po and Giant Armor. In the past, he didn't dare to do this. Every time he cultivated in the technique practicing room, he would place the scales in the spirit gathering array. He would let the blood chi mist and slowly absorb and refine it. However, as his cultivation increased and the strength of his divine sense strengthened, it didn't matter if he directly devoured the divine sense. It was the same for Hu Po. Ever since he returned from the immortal Essence City, he had been absorbing the blood veins in his scales, so he was no longer as stiff as before. From this point alone, the increase in the strength of his spirit had brought about many unexpected benefits. Lu Yi reckoned that if he entered the Mirage Realm again, the sequelae should not be as serious as before. In the past, every time he died in the Mirage Realm, he would have a splitting headache. However, he had been engrossed in Array Dao recently and had not gone to the Mirage Realm to train himself. After extinguishing the bonfire, Zhu Jia sat down to meditate and cultivate. Lu Yi held a book in her hands and studied it under the moonlight. Hu Po lay beside her and was already snoring. A thin and small figure silently crept over from 300 meters away. This figure had almost completely blended into the surrounding space. Even his aura and vitality were blocked by an inexplicable power and did not leak out at all. His body was so light that even if he stepped on the leaves, he would not make the slightest sound. His speed was not slow. It was almost the speed of a normal person walking. Obviously, he was very confident in his ability to hide. Previously, the Myriad Devil Ridge had lost track of Lu Yi. They only knew that he had disappeared nearby, but no one knew where he was. Now, there were many people secretly searching for him in the Myriad Devil Ridge. Without exception, these people were all ghost cultivators because ghost cultivators were the most suitable for this kind of thing. Hiding in the dark, the ghost cultivator stared at the figure of the young man in front of him. Even if his heart had been silent for many years, he could not help but ripple with excitement. Because as long as he could kill this young man named Lu Yi, he might have a chance to reach the Cloud River realm. Last time, in order to remove the Jade Blood sect, the major sects of the Myriad Devil Ridge had jointly issued an extremely generous reward. The reward was enough for any cultivator to enjoy for a lifetime. It was the same this time. Although the reward was not as heavy as last time, it was enough for him to buy hundreds of barrier-breaking pills. With so many barrier-breaking pills, he could open the subsequent spirit apertures and meet the requirements to reach the Cloud River realm. He had waited for this day for a full 30 years. In the spirit stream realm, there was an extremely special group of cultivators who were called the Veteran Ninth Order Realm. This had nothing to do with praise or derision. It was just a very appropriate name. Not every spirit stream realm cultivator was qualified to reach the Cloud River realm. For things like spirit apertures, the more difficult it was to open them. Everyone had their own limits. The human body had 360 apertures, but only 10% of spirit stream realm cultivators could open all 360 apertures. These people were, without exception, the most outstanding group of cultivators. Could it be that the remaining 90% had no way to reach the Cloud River realm? Naturally, there was. When a cultivator reached the Ninth Order realm, as long as they bought a heaven-grade secret art and opened 240 apertures, they could choose to reach the Cloud River realm after switching their original secret art to the corresponding heaven-grade secret art. In other words, if a cultivator wanted to reach the Cloud River realm, they would need to open at least 240 apertures, not one less. However, in this world, there were still many people who could not open that many spirit apertures. Some people reached their limit after opening 200 or so apertures. For example, this skinny ghost cultivator had only opened 223 apertures, 17 apertures away from the minimum requirement to reach the Cloud River realm. And he had been stuck at the Ninth Order realm for 30 years. Those who had been stuck at the Ninth Order realm for many years, unable to open the subsequent spirit apertures and reach the Cloud River realm, were the so-called Veteran Ninth Order realm cultivators. They were a very special group in the spirit stream realm. The strength of these people could not be classified as a simple Ninth Order realm cultivator, because almost every one of them could display strength that surpassed the Ninth Order realm. Many sects had such people. If one saw an old spirit stream realm cultivator on the spirit stream battlefield, they would generally be the so-called Veteran Ninth Order realm cultivators. When their cultivation stagnated and they could not continue cultivating, they would find ways to increase their strength. Therefore, these Veteran Ninth Order realm cultivators often had some strange methods that ordinary cultivators did not have. Take this ghost cultivator for example. Without mentioning anything else, his concealment skills had almost reached the acme of perfection. Most of the ghost cultivators in the core circle who had switched to heaven-grade secret arts could not be compared to him. Lu Ye of the Blue Blood sect was good at killing enemies above his realm. He had shown his talent in this area at the Golden Light Summit. Previously, when he had attacked the Windflower Courtyard, he had cut off one of Yu Mei's arms with 2 slashes of his 8th Order cultivation and seized the Array Jade Slit Ring. This information was not a secret, so the ghost cultivator had naturally heard of it. However, killing enemies above his realm was not exclusive to Lu Yi. Many geniuses in the cultivation world had this ability. Ghost cultivators were also the best at fighting the strong as they rarely fought head-on. As long as they found the right opportunity, let alone killing enemies above their realm, they could even kill enemies 2 or 3 realms above their own. Therefore, the ghost cultivator who had stealthily snuck over had a very simple task. He had to sneak up behind Lu Yi and launch an attack. He had to deal a fatal blow, cut off Lu Ye's head, and bring it back for a reward. The body cultivator named Giant Armor was a little troublesome. Once he exposed himself, this big guy would definitely attack him. However, he was confident in his speed, so as long as he could block Giant Armor's initial attack, he could easily escape. There were some risks, but compared to the rewards, what was this little risk? If he wanted to break through to the Cloud River realm, he had to bear this risk. The plan was perfect. However, when he was 10 meters away from Lu Yi, his body suddenly froze. Because at that moment, Lu Yi, who was reading a book, suddenly closed it and looked in his direction. When their eyes met, the ghost cultivator felt a chill run down his spine. Have I been discovered? Impossible! How could a trivial 8th Order weapon cultivator discover my tracks? He had full confidence in his concealment methods. He had once used this method to assassinate a 7th-order heaven-grade cultivator. Even today, he could still remember the look of disbelief in the other party's eyes before he died. Even a 7th-order heaven-grade cultivator couldn't discover his whereabouts, so how could an 8th-order weapon cultivator discover him? That's right, I didn't expose myself. There should be something unusual behind me that attracted Lu Yi's attention. The reason for this conclusion was that not only did Lu Yi raise his eyes to look at him, but even Giant Armor, who was meditating, opened his eyes and looked at him. Even the monster beast beside Lu Yi raised its head and stared in his direction in a daze. With 3 pairs of eyes staring at him, the ghost cultivator's pressure was as heavy as a mountain. If it was an ordinary young man, he might not be able to bear such pressure at this moment, but he had cultivated for so many years. What kind of storms and waves had he not seen? So even if he was frightened, he still remained calm. He tried his best to restrain his aura, and pushed his concealment method to the extreme. He slowly took a step to the side. A scene that made his hair stand on end appeared. The 3 pairs of eyes that were staring at him also turned. Lu Yi was even more interested. He supported his chin with one hand and touched the mountain ascending saber at his waist with the other, tapping the scabbard with his fingers. This time, the old ghost cultivator was completely at a loss. It was fine if Lu Yi could see through his whereabouts. Perhaps he was talented. But why did Giant Armor, this barbarian, have such strong perception? And that monster beast, why the hell did it? He had decades of ghost cultivation attainments in the netherworld. Was he so weak? The unfinished bonfire on the side flickered, making a soft crackling sound. The old ghost cultivator's figure turned into an afterimage as he pounced straight at Lu Yi, who was 10 meters away. What greeted him was a bright saber light. Blood splattered. The old ghost cultivator's chest was cut open. He was almost cut in half by the saber. He quickly retreated, perfectly adhering to the essence of a ghost cultivator's move of fleeing 1,000 miles away. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.